input for
Yeah.
traffic. We discuss it as a group, or we're just commenting as individuals. It would be more useful to us to just present
Oh,
a
okay.
group as consensus opinion.
You're all kind of here because I solicited input, not there was just a lot of butting of heads.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
I kept
so
asking
I think
about that, like, hey, how come there's
that
there's
been
stuff and there's
ongoing
all sorts of items
couple
on
of
the city
members.
council. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, that's an environmental.
but
It makes it hard. Yeah, I totally missed that the period that, oh, this is ending and you need to put in your.
Oh,
Yeah. So for me, it worked out. And then I was told, you should put it in, there's a decision. I'm like, okay.
One meeting, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
That was
Part of me wants to switch over to part. I mean, I'm counting down years. Definitely plan on being.
we having to send the email that we're not.
Well, it's the alternate.
Don't have that experience. It's not in
We're looking at
Oh. You know now? Okay.
life
Yeah, that was my
Ended
comment.
up
Hey, you get free labor.
similar money. Payers for stuff.
Yeah, 2 years. Meetings, like,
House,
you just threw
our
it out.
friends, our
Yeah.
family.
And that was an easy Zoom meeting.
That's
It
good.
was nice.
I said, oh, that's
Great.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. It is 6:04. What time would you like to begin the meeting?
Whenever we're all ready.
If we're ready.
Okay. Then I will call this meeting of the City of West Sacramento Environment and Utilities Commission to order. Let's begin with the land acknowledgement, which do we have a land acknowledgement to read? Don't.
Land acknowledgement is something that is optional. So you do have the option to go ahead and skip over that. Unfortunately, I do not have that particular script.
Okay, well, given that it's not in front of us, then I guess we'll skip over it for today. Then let's please rise, face the flag for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic. All right. So moving on to part one, general administration function, presentations by the public on matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. Do we have anything for
No, we.
one? Okay. And with that, moving on to item two, presentation on the climate action and adaptation plan status.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you all for being here. I'm glad we have a quorum. So last time we met, we got the climate action and adaptation plan adopted. So I figured since we're having this EU Commission, I could provide a brief update to the CAP itself and field any questions that you have. Next slide. Okay, so since adoption, we have a dedicated webpage on the city site, which you can access by going to wsac.city/cap. It explains when it was adopted, why we have a cap, and it also lists all of the 26 actions. In the background, I've been working with the departments throughout the city to establish primary and secondary responsibility for each of the actions to make sure that it's not just something we say we're going to do. We have people in charge of doing it. So I've got an agreement for all of those 26 actions, so people know who's in charge of it, who they need to be working with. And we also formed what I call the CAP super team. So I even gave everybody like a Marvel superhero nickname. I'm Captain America. Somebody else was Spider-Man. And in that meeting, we just did a very simple, straightforward assessment of where we stand with all 26 actions, because a lot of the stuff happening with the CAP precedes the CAP. There's things that the city's been doing for years. So out of the 26 actions, we already have 19 that are underway. And we have 7 that are not started yet. I will be providing the updates to those 19 to the city website so that, as we make progress with each CAP, residents can see what's going on. And I'll also provide updates via social media for people to go check that out. If you are curious, as I'm sure you are, which ones we haven't started yet. So we haven't gotten started yet on the low emissions off-road equipment requirement for our city contracts. So per the Air Board, we're required to have in our contracts that if some contractor is going to be doing work for us, they have to have low or zero emission equipment. So we'll be working on that one. Action 12, local solar and storage. So we don't currently have any incentive or program in place to increase adoption of local solar and storage, although I will say that our building team does have a streamlined approach. So permitting for solar is streamlined. So that is something that should help. The other items are related to Goal 4, which comes around building electrification, which is definitely a Goliath amongst the different goals and actions. So we haven't started actions 13, 14, or 15, which are related to building electrification programs, energy performance standards, and all electric new construction. We are working towards those things. They're just not in place yet. And then the other 2 are Action 19, reducing unnecessary material consumption, and 21, which is carbon removal. So carbon removal is definitely, not one of the primary things we want to be doing. We want to get rid of carbon through reduction first and through the planting of trees second, and then carbon removal is something that we can consider as not necessarily a last resort, but certainly something we want to minimize our usage of. So those are the ones that we haven't started yet. All the other actions we have made some level of progress on.
What was the one before the last one you mentioned?
So action 19 is unnecessary material consumption. That's part of Goal 5. So that is basically trying to create behavior change with our residents to, not just buy a new thing when something breaks. We do have the Repair Cafe, which is a wonderful program. It's not really known about enough or advertised about enough, and we're actually trying to get them into our next newsletter to help give them some spotlighting. But that is one of our actions, is just to try to reduce material consumption. Other updates, we are finishing up a ZEV action plan that is actually county-wide. So we have a consultant that we're working with. We did a big inventory. We have, as a city, around 300 vehicles, and we are receiving a plan from them for phasing those out into ZEV. So that requires site-by-site analysis of where charging stations need to go, ideal phasing, which places should get that first, which one's second. And incidentally, we also have a facilities master plan that's doing the same kind of work. So we're kind of looking at it from multiple angles, but the hope is that after we get this ZEV action plan, both as a county and as a city, we can be more aggressive in pursuing grants because we have a much clearer vision of what it is that we need. And then just a little fun bonus to this, I found out today that we have received, last year we received federal funds to purchase 3 EVs, and we finally got the go-ahead through our finance department to go buy them. So we're going to be phasing out 3 city vehicles with 3 new EVs. So we're hoping to, one of them will be sustainability. So we're going to get a truck, and it's going to be at events so we can showcase that we as a city are making sustainable decisions. I'm hoping to get like a cool decal on the side with like Recycle Bell, try to make it cool. And then the 2 other vehicles will be like building inspectors or a carpool vehicle, because even city staff sometimes have never driven in an EV before. Or if there's a staff member who wants to make the environmental choice, we have a carpool vehicle that's an EV, they can choose to use that vehicle instead of a fuel-based one. So that's exciting. And then this is the last slide. So I have made a budget request for the Climate Action Fund. So having a dedicated source of funding with which to fund an outreach campaign called the West Sac Climate Champ, as well as the Home Energy Audit Program. So the West Sac Climate Champ is my effort to try to throw positive light on those who have made environmentally positive decisions so that they can get a cool sticker and put it on their cup or on their car so that they can feel some pride in the decisions that they're making. Because I know often in the sustainability world, it's often just don't do this and don't do that. So I want to find a way to spotlight people. And I do believe that helps create normalization. When you see people who've already made the choice, they're proud of the decisions they've made. So that's the West Sac Climate Champ. And then the Home Energy Audit Program. This ties into the larger conversation we're having tonight about rates. So rates are going to go up. And in an effort to help lower those rates, we're going to launch a home energy audit program, which tackles free light bulbs, smart power strips, weather stripping, as well as education just on energy use, as well as water conservation. You know, we can check the meter for a leak. We can take a look at your sprinkler timer. We can look at your recycling practices to see if maybe you can downsize the size of your trash can. So I'm really eager to get the home energy audit program launched in tandem with the rate increases so that we as a city can say, hey, look, it's a requirement that we increase our rates. You know, we wish we could just keep them static forever, but we can't. The good news is you can sign up for a house call with Ryan and I'll come out and help you lower your water bill. So we're hoping that can be positive. And then the last item is we are in the process of scheduling interviews for a new position. It's a new outreach and enforcement staff position. So in the 10 years I've been with the city in sustainability, I've noticed that as passionate as we are about our programs, as passionate as we are about getting behavior change, we're often kind of stuck in the office filling out reports about what we're doing to make a change, and we don't have enough capacity to actually get out there. So I'm going to have a dedicated staff member who's going to be at all of the city events, the Rhythm on the River, Earth Day, Halloween stuff. They're going to partner with the Chamber of Commerce. Anywhere there's a public function, they're going to be there with our cool EV truck, with giveaways, with information about all of the programs that are available to our residents, either at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. Some of the things I've mentioned already, but our house calls, our smart controller rebate, things that are available through our waste management contract. You know, a lot of people don't take advantage of services that they're paying for. So we really want to be able to showcase that. And then hopefully through that outreach and enforcement person, they will take some burden off of existing staff so that my existing staff can really thrive in their jobs as well as pursue grants, because grant pursuit takes a lot and it's hard to go in and out of the office all the time. So I'm really excited about this new position and what it'll bring for our city and my division. And, yeah. And then with that, I'll just open it up for any questions.
Have any questions? Yeah.
You never know if this is on. Is it on?
Yep.
Okay, great. Great. I mean, sounds like you've made a lot of progress since we saw you last. And however, I wanted to address the elephant in the room and ask you what the changes of federal policy and the available of federal incentives and funding has been with respect to your planning process.
Yeah, I mean, we basically just stopped looking. You know, the money's not there. So we have continued to work with regional and county partners, where the Yolo County is forming a Yolo County Regional Collaborative, which the hope is if we can pursue funding at the regional level through the state, we have more chances of getting a county-wide grant. So we're pursuing that. I am hopeful that, like I said, once that new position comes in, my other staff members can be more aggressive about pursuing all kinds of grants in order to get funding. And then I'm also asking for funding through our existing city fees for the Climate Action Fund, so that we have I don't want to be simply grant-based. I want to be able to have some consistent funds that we can rely on for programs.
I think your idea about promoting the Repair Cafe is a really good one, and that there's other events that, as your capacity increases, to engage with the community for sort of learning opportunities that can extend beyond just, reuse, repair, but also to, reducing consumption and things like, tool sharing and those kinds of resources that make it possible for people not have to buy new things in order to do one task and then not use it again for a long time. So I really think that's a great idea to amplify the impact of that. And I was wondering too, with respect to the range of resources that are available to assist people to do things, is our website going to be amplified to provide those kinds of links and information to direct people to the right resources to do specific things?
Yeah, that's a good point. We actually had a high school intern help us with the home energy audit program, and she was able to come up with a big list of grants and services that are available. So we do have it kind of spread out.
Yes.
But I think that's a good idea. Maybe we could have one location within our site.
Like a portal.
Yeah.
Like just a portal of links that then they can go for the real deal.
Yeah. Something we have been working toward on that front is one of our recent newsletters. We changed it up and it was just a list of all the services.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people just don't know. So.
And they're hard to find.
Yeah.
You got to have the right search word to get to the right place.
Right.
We have no idea where it's going. And my final question is, will there be any kind of, on the website or in the newsletters, any kind of a tracking mechanism so the public can follow the progress of the CAP implementation?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, I mean, my intention is to update it, probably quarterly, as I meet with my super team and I get more updates, then I'll be updating the website. So we'll probably post to our social media accounts that that's happening. We also have separate newsletter notifications through the city. So if you sign up for environmental updates, then when we make updates to the website, we can push that out to those sources. But, I certainly want to be able to celebrate everything the city's already doing. So, we have found that, adding a little bit of funds to something like a Facebook post can really launch it. We recently did a survey for waste hauler services customer satisfaction, and we got like 1,000 responses, which I'd never seen before. I think part of it is because people just wanted to share their opinion, but it was also because we used social media. So we could certainly, each time we do an update to our CAP actions, do a social media blast with it.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think as part of that too, you can use that as an opportunity to solicit community involvement or offer ways for involved as well. I had one question related to the home energy audit program. Can you just give me an idealized version of what that looks like in terms of number of customers that you would like to be able to serve, and how many homes are we realistically going to be able to help with this audit program in your idealized scenario?
Yeah. So part of the funds from the Climate Action Fund that I'm hoping to get this fiscal year will go towards purchasing the supplies. So those supplies would be, I think, up to 20 light bulbs per house, smart power strips that can turn off your unused supplies, a few kind of assessment tools to be able to gauge, energy uses, aerators for faucets, things like that. So those would all be kind of like a kit that we would hand out during the home energy audit itself. We are also hoping that we'd be able to just provide general education about, where your energy use comes from, because, just like with the world of water, which I'm very familiar, people tend to think it has to do with how long they take a shower. That's the big factor in their water bill, but I was just talking with Rebecca that really it's your sprinklers. And so I think a lot of education would be ideal during the home energy audit, listing off those services. So one of our intentions is to have that exhaustive list of services as part of the home energy audit. Say, hey, here's some stuff from PG&E, from WM, from the city, from the county. Doing maybe not a full-scale water-wise house call, but certainly checking the meter, make sure they don't have a leak, checking their toilets, looking at their irrigation system to make sure it's not like excessive, as well as talking to them about their recycling habits, because that can make a big effect on their standard bill. If they're able to lower the amount of trash cans they need, that can lower their bill. So I think it's a little bit of a mentality of starting by just focusing on the bill itself and trying to get the bill lower, and then through that process, trying to add a lot of education around behavior change.
And so how many households would you ideally like to target in like a year one scenario? What do you think is
Yeah,
a
I mean,
feasible number?
I would say, so I've done about 700 house calls on the waterfront, and I think around 100 per year is good. So that would be wonderful. This new person, the outreach and enforcement person, they'll be doing these home energy audits, but they'll also be doing enforcement. We have enforcement on organics compliance. That's a big one. So they'll be busy. But I think if we could do 100 per year, I think that could be transformative.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, piggybacking off of Suzanne's question got me thinking. So, yeah, what was the percentage or total budget amount we were? Did we kind of lose a chunk that we were sort of relying on?
No,
Okay.
there weren't any funds that we were hoping to get or that we anticipated getting.
So it wasn't
It's
like
just
a-
that, there were, under the previous administration, some pretty robust grants out there that
Okay.
aren't there anymore. But, we're in the state of California, and, there are still, Prop 4 was passed. And that's a multi-billion-dollar bond. We're actually going to be meeting with the Parks Department to see if there's ways that we can take advantage of that Prop 4 funding to get some grants for the city.
Your office has an active list that you're prepared to pursue.
Yeah, we're on all kinds of listservs. So when we hear about something, I jump on the webinar and listen in and try to use my, the programs I'm trying to do and listen to the opportunities and see if there's any synergy there. But, again, like I said, the hope is that once this new enforcement person comes on, that frees up more capacity for my staff to be really ambitious about pursuing grants.
And when are you anticipating launching the launch date? Home energy audit program and the West Sac climate.
Probably this fiscal year. Yeah. So I have to get the person first. I have to, assess their level of expertise. So if they've done this in a previous jurisdiction and they're just ready to go, then it could be as early as January or February. If they need some training, then it'll probably be more like mid-year next year.
But the basic programs the structure of them are known, kind of laid out already.
Yeah. And, I'd love to provide you guys with a home energy audit at your own property if you want to kind of be my guinea pigs. And we could practice it, and then you guys can give us feedback about, hey, have you thought about this or that?
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes, just a question on the process. You came before this commission some time ago. We provided input. Was there any change to the actual document based on that input?
Well, we certainly, I believe one of the inputs we were given was about making sure that all the citywide action is kept in place, that it's not just, a document that gets shelved. So I've definitely made a priority about making sure that it's, that's what the responsibilities list was about, was making sure that it's not just like up to the city, but there's specific departments and divisions that are in charge. That was one piece of feedback I remember getting from this body. I'm not remembering the others, but I do remember writing them down, and I think I've been putting them into place.
I think the status on the website is a big deal.
Okay.
That it's there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item 3, workshop on water and sewer rate study and proposed rates.
I'll leave this where it is because we'll be tag teaming this presentation, and I'm probably the shortest one here. So, good evening. My name is Roberta Raper, and I'm the Finance Director for the City of West Sacramento. We're here tonight to present to the Commission the updated utility rate studies for the city's water and sewer utilities and receive feedback on the resulting proposed rates for the next 5 years. I'm going to kick it off. I've got a couple of slides in the beginning, a couple of slides to wrap it up at the end. And as I mentioned, we've got a lot of city staff, subject matter experts in all the areas here to assist. And I need to figure out how to use this really quick. Hey, there we go. All right, so we'll start with a little bit of background to catch up both the commission members and the public on the history of rates in the city and changes and impacts since the last rate update was implemented. Then we'll hand it over to Public Works O&M staff to describe the city's utilities, including issues and challenges currently facing each utility. Our capital projects staff will then provide an update on infrastructure projects completed recently, as well as planned and ready to go projects which are proposed for construction over the next few years, followed by an overview of the rate study and rate setting process by our consultant, HF&H, who will also review the resulting rate scenarios. We have 3 rate scenarios for each utility that we'll be going over. And we'll talk about cost cutting and rate mitigation measures that are included in those scenarios. And finally, HF&H will provide a comparison of our proposed rates under the recommended scenario to the rates of surrounding jurisdictions who also utilize Sac Sewer for sewer treatment services. You're welcome, of course, to ask questions throughout the presentation, but we've also got some time at the end for Q&A and feedback, which we I would love to get from you. And I mentioned we have several subject matter experts here ready to field your most difficult questions, so we are ready for you. All right, so to get started, we'll just start with a little history lesson. First, the city owns 3 utilities: water, sewer, and refuse. The refuse, or garbage and recycling, is excluded from the current process as they are currently working to release an RFP for waste hauler services. Those are the services that waste management is currently providing. And we've decided to hold off on studying the rates until a new contract is negotiated and future costs are known. So as such, tonight we're here to discuss water and sewer rates only. The water and sewer funds are enterprise funds, which means they operate as business-like activities and must generate sufficient revenues to cover the expenses of the utility. And that includes the operating costs, the required repair and replacement of infrastructure, and any debt service costs. So revenues are generated through the rates charged to customers who use the service and are calculated through the development of a cost of service study or a rate study. So the last rate studies were completed in 2011 and 2017, and each time included some of the lowest rates in the region, as the focus has been on cost-cutting measures and keeping rates low for customers, especially during and after the Great Recession. So the last rate adjustment was implemented July 1st, 2021, so rates have not been adjusted in the past 4.5 years. The water and sewer master plans, which identify necessary infrastructure investment in each utility, were completed and adopted by the City Council in January of this year. So since then, we've worked with our consultant, HF&H, to develop a cost of service study for each utility, which we plan to present for your feedback now. Before we do that, I just want to take a look at the numbers, some of the changes since the last rate study that are impacting what you're going to see tonight. This table provides a summary of the key economic indicators influencing our cost of operations and maintaining each utility, just to show how things have changed, like I mentioned, since the last rate adjustment was implemented. You can see there are some pretty significant rates there. Just the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, has increased about 19%. The CalPERS employer rate adjustment for miscellaneous employees has increased about 17%. Our Local 39 employees, excluding equity adjustments and other incentive pays, have received general base salary increases of about 23% over that same time frame. I looked at the total compensation for a senior maintenance worker from 21-22 to this year, and that's an 18% total cost increase. And then our master plans are completed, and so both as a combination of just the number of infrastructure projects needed and the increase in cost for construction, tariffs and other things that have been in place, we're seeing 183% increase in the annual infrastructure investment recommended by the Water Master Plan from what was included in the last rate study. And for sewer, it's a 450% increase in the recommended annual infrastructure investment from the last study. And to add to that, the water and sewer rates have increased by 0% in that time frame. So what this means is just to keep pace with the rise in operating costs of providing the same service today that we've been providing in the last few years, about a 20% increase would be needed immediately to make up for not having one over the last 4 years and the cost impacts that we're seeing. And that ignores infrastructure investment required to maintain reliable utilities. That's simply based on operating costs. So with that, before we sort of get into the actual numbers that come out of the rate studies, I'd like to pass it over to our Public Works O&M staff to give you some background on the utilities and what they do. Yeah, down goes forward, up goes back. So weird.
Good evening, Commission. My name is Chris Kanya. I'm the Water Treatment Superintendent for the city, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what I do and my infrastructure responsibilities. So I oversee the George Christoph Water Treatment Plant, which provides all the drinking water, the irrigation, and the fire suppression water for the city. We produce on average about 11 million gallons a day. That's taken out over the course of the whole year. Obviously, in the summertime, it's higher. Wintertime, it's lower. We have 8 reservoirs now. We had 7 when I started with the city, and the Rivers tank was added to our inventory list. So now we have another pump station and reservoir. There's 2 clear wells at the water treatment plant. We have 1 booster station. They call it a booster station. We're a single pressure zone for the city, so it's really not a booster station, but it moves water from the north side of town to the south side of town. We have about 212 miles of water mains, which I should be letting Bobby talk about because he and I share part of the water system on the distribution side, so I'm going to let him talk about the last 4 items there on the list, and then I'll go again.
How you doing? I'm Bobby Santos. I'm the Utilities Maintenance Superintendent, and I oversee sewer, water, roads, traffic signals, traffic lights, and storm drainage. So basically when Chris makes the water, or treats the water, puts it into the system, and then that's where me and my team take over to maintain the system and deliver the water. So we have about 212 miles of water line. Main lines. We have 97 miles of service line, so that's what goes from the main to your house. And then we have approximately 16,000 water meters. So that's what meters your water. We have 2,982 hydrants and 6,109 water valves. There we go. There we go. So going back to the water valves, everybody know what a water valve does? That's going to help control the flow of water. So we can shut it off if we need to, if there's a main line break. We could shut it off at the house if there's a service line break. So some of the challenges that we face is our infrastructure is aging. They're all older pipes. They're at end of service life. We have regulatory compliance that is forever changing and getting stricter. And then our water meters are kind of, a lot of them are at end of life. And so it's like every 3 to 5 years, we should be replacing a water meter to keep it the most accurate. And then I'll let Chris talk about water rights and supply. Yay.
Also, I'd like to add that the city incorporated in 1987, and when they did, they inherited about 35% of the city is all inherited from Yolo County. That's water infrastructure that's now 80 plus years old or older. So not having accurate records to know when some of that infrastructure was actually put in. But the records that we have found date back to the 40s and a little bit earlier than that. So the water rights and supply that he's talking about, mentioned anyway, is our water supply contract, which gets affected in dry years. State of California implements what they call Term 91, which reduces our ability to divert water off of the river. And then our federal contract can also get affected by the dry year, also by a reduction of percentage of how much we can actually use, which puts us to the North Delta Water Agency water, which is another portion of our contract, which we can only use in the south part of town. So that leaves the north part of town a little bit in a deficit. So with that, we're looking at alternative water supplies to supply the water for the city of West Sacramento. And that's kind of related to the increased capacity needs. So with the aging infrastructure, our concerns are, is that the next one? So with that, the aging infrastructure, that's some of our concern is how the efficiency of being able to deliver water to the growing city and the needs of the city. So I'll turn it over to Bob.
I'm back. So talk about the sewer, give you sewer system overview. 214 mile of sewer pipelines, 9 pump stations, 5 lift stations, and all of our, does everybody know what the difference between a lift station and a pump station is? So basically, so the lines are all gravity for the sewer. So it gets to a certain level and then we have to pump it up to another level to get it out. So that's what a lift station does. It takes it from a low point back to a high point to continue on this gravity to a pump station, which then pumps it under pressure to the county interceptor. So our sewer is treated by the Sacramento Area Sewer District, SASD, at their wastewater treatment plant in Elk Grove. And they have separate rates that they impose for the treatment of water. Some of our challenges are going to be the same as we have our challenges in water. Aging infrastructure, like Chris was saying, a lot of our pipes we inherited, and some of them we don't know the age of. And then a lot of it we can tell by when we inspect the sewer that they're older and they're starting to fall apart. So the repair and replacement costs have gone up over the last 5 to 10 years dramatically. We're starting to see a lot more backup, sewer backups, so where the system gets plugged, and then we're seeing pipes fail, so that causes a sinkhole because the pipe is broken. Then it's plugged the sewer, and then it's also taking dirt, so you'll see a sinkhole. And then because of the age, a lot of the joints get worn over time, so we're seeing a lot of infiltration and inflow into the system, which then increases our cost for pumping it, because now we're not only pumping sewer, we're pumping groundwater too. So we're having to pay those added costs to pump that extra water out. So, and we're getting to a point where we're at system overload and our pumps can't keep up with what's coming in. Some of the key accomplishments that we've made, we've replaced 65 water services. We've installed or replaced 8 hydrants. We've made 17 repairs on water mains. We've replaced 79 water meters this year. We had 2 sewer main repairs that we've had to do. We've had about 56,683 feet of sewer main inspection, CCTV inspection. That's where we go with a camera that we drive through the main and grade and score the main. And we've cleaned about 167,686 feet of sewer mains this year so far. So I'll let Chris take over.
I guess I shouldn't have sat down. So on our side of key accomplishments for us, we've in the past year and a half, we've produced 6.5 billion gallons of drinking water for the city. We've also accomplished 36,605 water samples that we have taken and analyzed at the treatment plant. We do process sampling at the water treatment plant to monitor the actual water process, so we know that the water quality parameters are being met. We've also had 3,213 samples that have been analyzed by an outside lab, which does all of our Title 22. That's our regulatory sampling that's required by the state and federal government. And we have, that was what's mentioned there, the Title 22 regulations. So some pretty significant accomplishments that we've done in our water side. So.
Over to Amber.
I'm Amber Wallace, Senior Civil Engineer with Capital Projects Division. And here's a list of completed infrastructure projects that we've done over the last 5 years. And most of these projects are due to the age of the pipe, maybe being built in the 1940s, like State Streets, water and sewer. And our crews were having to go out and replace broken pipe. Water mains spray up so you can kind of see it, but sewers don't. Water comes into it, like the groundwater, and it creates these sinkholes. And so they're kind of sneaky because sometimes we don't see the break until, who knows, months later, until a sinkhole opens up, and then that can be dangerous on the street. Linden Acres, water main replacement. That project was very needed as well. Linden Acres had all their water main in the backyards. The backyard water mains would break all the time, and you'd fix one spot, and because they're pressurized, another leak would just pop up like 10 feet down. So the overtime in just that neighborhood was really significant. And so fixing that was a big relief to the neighborhood and also to our maintenance crew. All the sewer lift stations are in dire need of repair, but the worst ones were the Coke Street and Triangle Court sewer lift station rehabs. We were able to get those done in the last 5 years, and it saved our crew so much time and having to babysit those lift stations, make sure that they don't overflow, back up into the system, and then there's also just, there's issues with fog. With sewer, when people flush the toilet, they should only flush toilet paper and human waste. And so that's called, like those flushable wipes are not flushable. And then also fog is fats, oils, and grease, which is typically something you might wash your dishes and like let all the oil or salad dressing go down the drain. That stuff's terrible for the sewer. So even if they're in good condition, these types of behaviors cause more maintenance for our people. So we need to have more outreach for that kind of activities to make sure people understand in their language how to treat their sewer line. The SCADA update is just an electronic system for the entire sewer and water, and it allows people to watch all of our pump stations from a single location. And so projects like that really help with our staff time as well. We recently updated the water and sewer master plans, which are required by the state. There's many other reports that are required by the state, stuff like the urban water management plan, the sewer system management plan. There's just all these reports and regulations for water and sewer, so we have to keep up with all the state requirements too. So these last two projects here, I'm going to talk about a little bit more on the next slide, but down. Okay. So these projects have actually been investigated and designed, and they're really needed. We just don't have the money for construction. So the first one is the high service manifold vault and effluent water meter project. And you can kind of see how we have these pumps at the effluent of the water treatment plant. And so the water treatment plant only has that one effluent, and it's called a manifold. It's underground, it's buried. We think there's problems with it, but we can't see it. So we're trying to do investigations on a buried pipe. and it's the only one there. So if it went down, we wouldn't have water to the city, which includes fire suppression and includes just, all your water needs. So the project is to create a vault so that our staff can safely get down there, maintain it, not just for this project, but in the future, in case it, it gets old again. And it's an extremely critical asset. And we're going to also include an effluent water meter, which is required by our state. So we need $7.2 million for that project just alone. Another project that's ready to go is the South Sewer Lift Station. And this project is kind of in the State Streets neighborhood. It's on Park and Stone. And the design is practically complete, but we do not have the money to go to construction. The pump station is currently too small to handle just normal high flows. Our maintenance guys have to babysit it, make sure that everything's working as best as it possibly can, because it's just too small. We don't have backup. Like if one pump goes down, we would have to back up the system. They really have to watch this pump station really carefully. It also requires safety and performance updates, which will also help our maintenance crews just be safe while they're maintaining it. And we need $6 million for this project. So these are just things that are even ready to go. We don't. We're just waiting for the money. That's the only thing. So I did want to talk a little bit about the sewer and water master plans. They're a comprehensive assessment of the systems to identify capital improvement needs. They're typically done every 5 years, though I think our last one was done in 2018, so we have not been keeping up with the 5-year, but in the future, I hope that we do. The recommended 5-year water CIP is $89.5 million, and so that's approximately $18 million per year. And the recommended 5-year sewer CIP is $54.1 million, which is approximately $11 million per year. So let's go into some of the projects. So water meters only last 20 years at the most, so we have to continually replace them. And we're way behind on that right now. I think we have water meters that are probably 25 years old. So they're, when they start dying, they stop recording the water. So then we can't base our rates off of them because they're much lower than what the people are using. So it's good for, someone who wants to pay less on their water bill, but not good for the city in maintaining our water system. The Washington District Infrastructure Rehab is a project that's actually funded. We have some grant money for it. And so we're updating water, sewer. We looked at the storm drains, but we decided that they were all in good shape. And we also are adding fiber to this neighborhood. So the water meter replacement project is also funded, just to be clear. The Westmore Oak Sewer and Water Rehab is a similar neighborhood to State Streets. It was also built around the same time. These pipes are probably from the 1940s, never been updated. So we need to replace all the sewer and water lines in the neighborhood. And we have some money set aside for design, but nothing for construction, but we're just starting design, so we have time. CCTV inspection and cleaning of the sewer system is something that we work on in-house already, but we don't have the staff to actually get it done as often as we need to. So we should be looking at these pipes every 5 years, and we don't do that currently. So the $5.2 million is an estimate on how to get that done. If not in-house with our own equipment, then with subs, like contractors that come out and do it. We also talked about infiltration and the infiltration, the sewer system I&I reduction is infiltration of groundwater into the sewer system. This causes a lot of problems because it's extra high energy costs to the pump stations. We have to treat more at the wastewater treatment plant. And so to look at that in the different neighborhoods, is about $9.1 million, because we'd have to look around many different neighborhoods. But the worst ones right now, I believe, are Bright and South have the worst. So all the sewer pump stations do need updates. They're all on the small side. They're all old. The total cost of all the updates is $42.1 million, which is a significant portion of the sewer master plan efforts. They say we need to look at all our pump stations. The water pump station, PSIP, is $10.2 million. It really needs to be done. Water replacement program is water main line replacement. We estimate $44.6 million of water main replacement is needed in the next 5 years. This will also, this will improve reliability of the system and also just the age. Some of them are too old, some of them are too small. So it's kind of a combination. And then the water tank rehabilitation projects. A lot of the water tanks are older, and they provide the supply and also the pressure for our system. So we need them in good working condition to operate the water system correctly. So there's just a lot of needs, and we don't have the funds to keep up with the needs of our city. And it's really hard on my staff because we want to do all the projects we can, and we don't always have the money. And, you know, grants are often hard to get, and when we do get them, we love them. And we did get a grant for Washington District and some other projects, but they're sometimes far and few in between. So being a good water purveyor includes making sure the water treatment plant works, making sure our water system is in good repair, and then on the converse side, the sewer has to also be in good repair so that we don't have problems like backups. We don't have lack of water. We don't have any water quality issues or like sinkholes and things like that, which when you have an emergency situation, like if we just ignored one of these projects and said, we can't do it, so we're not going to, and an emergency happened and the tank failed or the pipe failed, then once it becomes an emergency, it's at least twice as much because we have to rent all the equipment. We're paying everyone overtime. We're asking people to drop what they're already doing to do this project. And so it's way more expensive to just wait until stuff fails. And we have really good maintenance guys. They work so hard and do a lot of overtime to make sure everything's staying together. But it's really, some of this stuff is really old. And we need to support them by updating it. So thank you. I'd like to introduce Dave
Before you go, I have a
with
quick,
HF and
I
H.
have just a quick question.
Yeah.
So this projected cost, budget versus need, you mentioned that there's some system aspects that are too small to handle current capacity.
Mm-hmm.
This budgeted or projected amount is taking into account that upgrade of capacity?
Yeah.
And is that upgraded capacity going to be sufficient to match the projected growth of the city that's been outlined for the master plan?
Yeah, so in the master plan, they have growth as well. And the growth is paid for a lot by the developers. So this is just to ensure that we have enough capacity in our existing system.
Okay, so this is just
So
for
it's more
existing
like-
service in neighborhoods?
Yeah,
Not
like
for expansion.
infill into neighborhoods, and maybe people are using more water. Typically, your normal household uses less water than they did in the past, but I know we have businesses coming in that are water heavy, and they'd like to come in, and the sewer system and the water system get affected by that. But the capacity increases that the water master plan and sewer master plan in this instant is all just in regular neighborhoods. They're not in the new development, because new development is paid for by the new developer.
But they are addressing infill or, you know,
Mhm.
upgrading, for example, medium density housing over lower density.
Yeah, like in the Washington District.
Yeah, that was kind of my questions was for that area. I know that
Yeah.
there's a lot of infill and growth happening for more medium and higher density.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the system can handle it without, breaking or causing backup.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just a follow-up question on that.
Sure.
For new development, I imagine there's the central areas here, like a water tank rehabilitation, a CCTV inspection. Those are all central, right? It has nothing to do with a new development. Is there a proration for the developers to pay a portion of that as they're coming in? Because they may not have used it previously, but there's going to be a cost coming up, and then they have a share of that to make sure that it's operational.
That's not a question for me. I'll have to put it off to Roberta.
Yes, developers, when new development comes in, they pay water and sewer connection fees. They're similar to impact fees that provide funds to the city to do the improvements that are necessary to serve that development. As part of this, after we get through the rate thing that we're working on, we're also reviewing our connection fees based on the information in the master plans. So the master plans will give you kind of both capacity improvements needed to serve new development, and then also the repair and replacement for existing infrastructure. So what's included in the rate models only includes those pieces, does not include the pieces related to new development. We'll be studying our connection fees for water and sewer to ensure those are updated appropriately after we finish the rate study that we're working on right now.
Okay.
We had to wait for our master plans to be completed to do those as well.
Right, just to clarify, so we have the water tank rehabilitation at 33.8 million. Is a new development or developer going to pay any portion of that?
No, if we're talking about the things that you saw here, that is specifically for rehabilitation and replacement of existing stuff serving our existing people. New developers will pay connection fees based on their proportionate share of buying into the system and serving the new development, but that is separate from this process right now.
But if these things fail, they'll impact both new and old development. Is that correct?
That's for somebody else. Certainly, there are things that are in place now that are going to serve new and old development, but to the extent possible, and maybe Rick can speak to this a little bit more, those pieces that should be paid by developers and should be paid by existing customers are separated so that each party pays their fair share of what they do. You have more that you want?
Well,
I'm gonna
okay.
I'm gonna pass it off to our
Okay.
financial.
Good evening, Rick Simonson with HF&H Consultants. And just to elaborate a bit on what Roberta's mentioning, yes, there's a difference between just maintaining what's currently needed for the current capacity and additional capacity is paid by those new developers. Those monies are used in these projects if there's an increase in capacity at a specific tank. That portion that's related to that new capacity is passed on to those developers. But they do make use of existing infrastructure throughout the city because it's one whole system. So there is a component of the connection fees that are currently set and will be studied to see if they need to increase, most likely. That does pay for their share of the existing system as well. So that comes in two components when we look at connection fees. Buy into the existing system and the incremental costs associated with providing additional capacity for those individuals. So that will be studied once we can complete this rate study to understand what that breakout is for those new developments. So they will chip in for the existing capacity in the system because ratepayers have been paying for that capacity that's there for them to connect. Not everything needs to be upgraded. Does that help clarify or give you some idea that they do chip in for existing?
Yeah, go ahead with your presentation. We'll find out more.
Excellent. So just a little background again, Rick Simonson, Senior Vice President with HF&H. I lead our rates and audits group. So we do water, sewer, and solid waste rates throughout California. So we've been assisting the city over the last year with the water sewer rates. So we're just going to do a high-level overview. And as Roberta mentioned, we do have 3 different scenarios for each of the 2 enterprises. And I did listen. You said up and down. Let's see if I can make it work. Oh, it is delayed. Go too far. No, right here. As Roberta did mention, the city's utilities are operated as self-supporting enterprise funds. The revenues that are generated from the rates that we'll be discussing today can only be used within each of the two utilities. Any additional revenues that might exceed the expenses of that year are just held in the fund as a reserve. They cannot be used for general purposes throughout the city to provide other services. So just want to make that clear with our cost of service studies. It's about sustaining that specific enterprise, and the revenues generated from the rates can only be used for that purpose. When we undertake a cost of service study, there's a few steps that we must follow. First, we have to identify those costs that need to be covered. The operating and maintenance costs, the capital costs, any debt service from outstanding debt. We need to track those costs because during a cost of service study, we need to look at the services that are being provided to each customer class and make sure that the rates are set so each of those customer classes are only paying their fair share and nothing more. And at the end of this presentation, as we go through the scenarios, I will show you the impact of the recommendations for each of the scenarios on your average residential customer, to give you some context and compare and contrast. Let's first get into the sewer rates. Your current rate structure for how residents and businesses are charged for sewer services, single-family and multifamily residents are charged a fixed rate per month per dwelling unit, so that does not change during the year. Commercial customers are charged a separate fixed charge as well as a variable charge because there's so much discrepancy between how commercial customers use water and discharge that into the sewer system that there's a separate charge to make it equitable among those customers within the commercial class based on their actual water use. And it's based on what we call a per unit charge of 100 cubic feet. And what that is 748, actually 0.052 gallons is a unit. And Rebecca was nice enough to give you a visual of what that looks like. So this is 1 unit of water, about 748. So I know I'm discussing it here on the sewer. It becomes more important and a little more understandable when we get to the water rates. But because commercial customers are charged on a per unit basis, I thought this would be a good time to demonstrate what 1 unit of water is. It's quite a bit. Whoop. I think we'll. All right, the second click did not go. Thank you. So your current sewer rates, as I mentioned, there's different customer classes. Both your single family and multifamily have a fixed per month charge, and that's currently $10.88 for single family. And as multifamily customers, on average, discharge less wastewater into the collection system, they're charged $8.16 per dwelling unit. Commercial is a flat rate of $5.40. That's to cover most of the fixed costs. But then, as I mentioned, they do have a metered 100 cubic foot charge of every unit of water that they use of $3.16. There's some other non-residential that is based on an equivalent single-family dwelling, and that is also charged at $10.88. And I'll mention this slide here. These are the rates that are necessary to provide funding for the collection system that the city maintains. It does not include the charge from Sac Area Sewer District. So those treatment costs, that's $44 per month. So currently the $10.88 that residents see on their bill, it's about 20% that comes from the city. The $10.88 is about 20% of their total charge for collecting the sewage and treating the sewage. That'll just give you some context when we look at comparing ourselves to other jurisdictions. So what are some of the key issues that are affecting the sewer rate recommended increases? You'll see we are recommending some, on a percentage basis, some pretty significant increases over the next 5 years. What's causing that? As mentioned earlier, there has not been a rate increase since 2021, even with the rising costs that Roberta mentioned. So we know the current rates do not cover the current or projected costs over the next 5 years. And I think I failed to mention, during a rate study, we do a 5-year outlook. Per Proposition 218 in California, that's the longest time that you can set rates for. They don't allow anything greater than 5 years, so that's why we look at a 5-year outlook. So we do know additional funding will be needed for the wonderful projects that have been mentioned here, from the master plan of upgrades and repair and rehabilitation that is needed. Here's a snapshot just to give you a high-level view of, what are your costs and what are your current revenues. So what we show here is a stacked bar chart, which shows the different components of your annual expenses. The operations and maintenance there on the bottom. The dark green there are your O&M costs, so basic running of the operations, increasing over time to 2930. Debt service, so you do have existing bond for sewer that was issued in 2017, will be paid off in 2047, so that's the dark blue just on top of that green. That will continue through the duration of these 5 years. And then lastly, it's those capital projects that we've been discussing here tonight. They're quite extensive, as you can see on the plan need and the timing of those needs. What's a bit eye-opening here, I also show the total current revenue at current rates. That's roughly at about $5 million. So in 25-26, your current year, we're projecting a bit of a shortfall, but you are covering your O&M costs, your debt service, and you're still able to do some capital projects. There's reserves there to help bridge that gap in 25-26. But you'll see in future years it gets quite a different picture. We can't even cover the O&M costs by year 29-30, let alone debt service that is required to be repaid. So we know significant increases will be necessary on a percentage basis because we're currently bringing in about $5 million per year. And just in 26-27, that blue capital is about $10 million just in the next year. Another $15 million the year after. So we are facing some large increases, but we know it's good to look at options of how we can accomplish bridging that shortfall over time. So how can we bridge that shortfall? There's a number of different ways of accomplishing this. First and foremost, just the rates. Covering those capital costs on a cash basis. If we're only generating $5 million and we need $10 million more the next year, that's a doubling, $15 million, a tripling. So we know we need to look at other options, not just covering it through rate increases. You do have reserves available. And I'll show some of the fund balance so you can see where those reserves are currently and how we're going to utilize those over time. You can issue debt to help spread those costs over a longer period of time. And there can be some reluctance to issue debt, but we have to remember here, these are long-term projects that may last for these assets 30 to 50 years. So it is appropriate at times to issue debt to cover those costs so those costs are spread over time. So the larger rate base that comes in maybe 5 years from now will help pay for those assets as well. And it's not just borne by your current ratepayers. So we did look at a combination, increasing rates, utilizing reserves, and issuing some debt. So we've talked about 3 scenarios. So what does that mean? So over the next 5-year period, we put this little matrix here together, what we're calling low, mid, and then kind of the full ask. And that's based on the master plan. So the full ask looked at that master plan, looked at when those projects should be done, the amount of those projects, and spread them through the 5. And our model actually did a 10-year period because some of those projects will need to take place in year 6 through 10. So we wanted to give you an idea of what are the differences between the scenarios. For the full ask, we need about 8.8 million per year on average over the next 5 years. And to help reduce the necessary rate increases, we also looked at kind of a mid-range. Which projects may we possibly defer to the next 5-year period instead of taking them on right away? So we've looked at the average of about 7.2 million per year being spent on those capital costs, and at the low end, 5.5. They do include some debt-funded projects in each case, and it ramps up as we go from the low up to the full ask. Again, the full ask, all the projects within the master plan.
Very quickly, when you say debt issuance, in what form is that debt issue for capital project?
Yeah, so typically what we've modeled here is a bond issuance, a revenue bond. There are low interest loans from the state or federal government can help with these, but we've assumed a 5% interest over a 30-year period at this time.
Via bond, primarily.
Via bond. So here's a fund balance graph, and we've started here with the full ask. Coming into the year at the end of June 30, 2025, there's about 8 million in the fund for sewer to help pay for some projects in the future. And that's what's depicted here in the solid green line, are utilizing those funds over time and reaching about the target reserve balance by 2930. And let me give you a little detail on how to read the graph. The solid red line at the bottom is a minimum target of 25% of your O&M costs. That's a good mark to strive for, not dip below that red line so that you can make your day-to-day expenses a cash flow. It's there as you bill only periodically, but you have day-to-day expenses. But we don't want to see you dip below that red line. On top of that, we'd like an allowance for capital. So another 25% of O&M, so 50% total O&M, so that's compounding up to that blue line. So this helps us gauge what these necessary revenue increases need to be over the 5-year period. So we keep you never going below that red line and trying to get to that target by the 5th year. So these are the more significant revenue increases that I was mentioning. Remember, this is on a $10.88 current rate. So it's a bit intimidating to see that percent, but if we were to raise 36%, that's just less than $4 per month. However, I do want to caveat with the cost of service analysis. As I mentioned, we have to look at the customer classes individually. So the first year for 25-26 is what we call a realignment. So the 36% is not a 36% increase to every rate that you saw on that rate table. And in this case, we are seeing that residential has not been keeping up with their cost of service in a more significant shortfall than commercial. So we're seeing something larger for residents than the 36% increase. And the commercial for the first year can actually reduce a bit. But from that point forward, from 26, 27, and 29, 30, those increases are applied uniformly across all customer classes once the cost of service was realigned in the first. Yes.
Just to figure out the math here, the previous presenters identified 18 million and 18 million a year plus 11 million a year, and it's 55,000 households. That's more than, if it's $10 times 36%, more than $3 per household per month. So I'm trying to figure out how we are getting to the 36% on $10, which is pretty small, right? To the millions of dollars we're getting at with just 55,000 households.
Yeah, so that's why you'll see we're not just keeping it up with inflation over the next 4 years. It is phasing in by utilizing reserves as you see the sloping downtrend of the fund balance. So we don't have to just rely on increased rate revenue to bridge that gap. So we are seeing a significant increase, but not as much because we can rely on the reserves for a few years until they start to become depleted and we hit that target. So it's not a 1-for-1.
Right, but what then is proposed it's possible in 5 years, if things haven't been fixed, we have other millions of dollars that would increase again at that point.
Yes, that's why we looked at a 10-year outlook. So if you saw what was proposed in the next 5 years, and again, our crystal ball is not even great for 2 to 3 years out, let alone 10 years out. That's why I think the state kind of cut it off at 5 years. We did look at 10-year, and with more moderate my recollection is correct, 5 to 7% annual increases thereafter, you trend that target line there. So we do a larger outlook so we don't set you up for unexpected spikes again in that second 5-year period. Yes.
I think it's also important to note that we're only looking at sewer here. You've combined both water and sewer in the numbers that you're talking about. We're looking at sewer separately. Because of the using reserves, utilizing debt to fund some of those projects, we're not including $11 million a year in pay-as-you-go projects for sewer. We used a combination of those. So, and this is our full ask scenario. It's not a recommended scenario. So I would recommend letting them get through the different scenarios and then see kind of where we end up. It's a complicated process and study that looks at a lot of these things. So you can't necessarily do simple math to figure out what $11 million is converted to a rate increase. But because we're using debt, a combination of reserves and rate increases, the full amount that you see in the master plan does not automatically convert to a rate increase to cover that full amount.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully that helped clarify it. I didn't mention, because we're issuing debt, you're getting that cash up front to pay for those large projects, but you're spreading that out over a 30-year term. So just a debt service has been included in those expenses.
I have just one more question before
Yes.
you get on, because I know this will apply to all 3 scenarios. So for the different asks for these CIP projects, what kind of work was there done to rank by essentially positive externalities, like projects that are more cost saving and more beneficial to do first versus later, to push out? Because
Yeah,
I know this mid-ask scenario is going to be recommended, but
Right.
are we going to be offsetting some potential positive externalities that would save us more money?
That's an amazing segue into the next slide.
Oh, cool.
So I'm glad you brought it up. And we will visit each of the CIP asks after looking at each fund balance. So we'll be tag teaming here.
Great, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Jay Chahal, Director for Capital Projects. And what we wanted to do after each graph and each scenario is kind of go through each capital project that we're getting with each scenario to walk down why we chose to go with each one and which ones we put forward. As Amber mentioned, these are all conducted in the Water and Sewer Master Plan. So these are conducted by a third party. All 3 of these scenarios that we walk through, as we move projects from one year to the next, sometimes you'll see that the dollar amount has increased. By phasing a project, that does happen. So there's multiple mobilizations. Splitting a project up into multiple years is not ideal. Typically for a neighborhood project, what we try to do is to deal with water and sewer first. So we do underground first, similarly what we did with State Streets, with Linden as well. And then we work up and we do our roads and then we leave and we don't open the roads up again. That's the most ideal scenario. So walking through all these 6 projects that you see here, the sewer fund is very limited. So we had to be very careful on what we chose. These are projects that are currently in design, like Amber mentioned. The South Lift Station, that's a critical infrastructure in our system that is being designed. We need to move that forward. So it was chosen to be done in 26, 27. And in this full ask scenario, we are able to move forward with a couple projects a year and still have funds for major system rehab projects such as main lines. So as you look in here and go across it, this is very front loaded, and that is intentional because we are behind on one thing, and then if we spread them out over years, our money stretches a little bit less, and these projects keep increasing in cost. As Roberta mentioned, we have tariffs, we have natural increases going up, we have labor increases going up. So when we walk through water and sewer, that to keep in mind, we'll highlight each project and how it is affected by splitting it up. But it's not the ideal scenario. What we'd like to do is do a project, for instance, the south lift station, that's intended to be happening all at once. When we go into a neighborhood like Westmore Oaks, we intend to do water and sewer at once. So this full ask is not a nice to have. This is just like all of our key infrastructure that has to be addressed. And it is all highlighted in our master plans. So now Rick's going to...
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing the vault project.
So this is just sewer. I'm sorry, I should have clarified that. So this, we're going to be walking through sewer first, and then we'll do the same exact exercise with water.
Oh, okay.
So Rick will walk through the graphs, and then I'll go through the CIPs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So moving to the mid-level, sorry. Again, same graph, just with different assumptions on the CIP funding. None of the O&M has changed from scenario to scenario. So Jay will walk through the differences in those capital projects. I just wanted to highlight here, under the full ask, we are looking at a cumulative revenue increase over time of about 153% over the 5-year period. Just to compare to this scenario, you'll see a similar first-year increase, but this reduces the need over the next 5 years to 127% increase in your revenue. So just to give you some context of the differences in the percentages you see at the bottom of the graph. We're still in the same position of utilizing the reserves in the first years and then hitting that target, never dipping below that red line in any given year. So we did these scenarios so we'd end up in the same place. We have an apples to apples comparison, right about that target in 2930. So let's talk about the differences in the capital that leads to the ability to have less cumulative increases over the next 5 years.
Thank you. So as you can see on here, we're not able to do multiple projects in 1 year, especially 26, 27. The Bright Lift Station, which is also in dire need, we can push it out to 28, 29. This was difficult, for us to walk through and do, but why we're going for this as a recommended scenario is staff felt this is digestible. So this is a rate that can be done, and although it's not ideal to push these projects out, we still get them done within the 5-year time frame. You'll see some that are beyond that into the 5 years and beyond, so those projects didn't just disappear, or that funding didn't disappear. It's just pushed beyond the 5-year window that we're looking at right here.
So just to recap, it was a $44 million spend over the last 5 years with the first scenario and reduced by about $8 million. And again, that was just pushing that out to the next 5-year period. So just deferring those projects, not canceling those projects. And looking at the low, again, the cumulative increase has decreased from the full ask, which was a 153% increase over the 5 years, to 115%. So we are still looking at significant increases, but we wanted to look at, if we had to, what was the lowest number of projects, cost of projects that we could defer or do currently and defer more of the projects to the next 5-year period. So again, we use the reserves over time, do not dip below that red line with this scenario, and end up at that target reserve in 2930.
And just to clarify, as
Yes,
was presented earlier, the cost of those, anything deferred, is significantly higher. So when you look at 5 years from now, it'll be even higher.
that is correct.
So in the low scenario here, we don't get very much done at all, and you'll see that here. Projects that are critical, that need to happen, we're having to push those out into very far years or into the next rate study. So this is not an ideal situation where we're having to, and then we're trying to accompany this with the water projects as well. So in Westmore Oaks, it's like in 26, 27, we're trying to do a water project, a sewer, but we don't want to be ripping up the road twice, right? So we're trying to balance that very, very carefully, but with only getting $6 million a year out of there, we are not able to really move forward with projects at the speed we need to in this scenario, and then pushing them out even further, looking at 29, that $8 million it could by then be even higher with those scenarios. With South and moving that out, we are already having so many issues at that plant or at that pump station. We would have to probably most likely come back and ask for emergency funds or something to deal with that situation. So this is not what we would recommend. With the mid scenario that Rick was kind of going over, that's the ideal scenario that staff feels most comfortable with. With this one, it's really putting our key infrastructure in a really bad situation.
Is there a probability cost here? So there's a risk of failure, and that risk of failure comes with a dollar amount. So I don't know if you would put that probability in the equation here and come up with a potential dollar amount that covers your risk, or at least present it to say, yeah, this is going to cost, but this is the probability of additional cost in this 5-year period.
And maybe the city can speak to that. I don't know if that study is done on the probability of failure and then the costs associated with that. No, that has not been included.
Okay.
I think the real question is for our gentleman with boots on the ground. Of these projects that are identified, do you feel that there's an adequate grasp of which ones are at risk for highest failure on the water and sewer side within these next 5 years? Like, if you could have a ranked choice of which ones you think need to get done immediately, does that relatively well match with the full and mid ask scenarios that are presented here?
Input.
Okay, thank you.
And then to answer your question, I think on what would happen in worst case scenario of the cost of putting like a lift station on bypass for multiple years while we wait is millions and millions of dollars. Like, that's not anywhere where we want to be or ideal situation. So those costs can grow a lot. When you're in an emergency situation, in that scenario, you'll be getting contractors out there at a much higher rate. They're out there at night. They're out there in times when it's not ideal, and that would add to that.
And the issue is that we may not have funds because you have a calculation here with us doesn't identify that. So we would, I guess, to the folks on the ground, you would have to reprioritize your project. You'd borrow
Correct.
from some other.
Yes, that's correct.
So just to summarize on the sewer side before we move to the specific bill impacts, we just want to do this side by side, revisiting what the assumptions were for how much capital is necessary in each of the 3 scenarios, as well as how much would be debt funded. We provided here for your residents the impact to the bills in the first year compared to current, how they change over the 3 scenarios. And I want to mention again, the reason why I was mentioning, 30, 40% increases cumulative over 100%, this 12% that's represented there in the first year, 17 and 16 by the full ask, that is the total bill for the collection as well as treatment. So that includes, since only 20% of your sewer bill is for your services, the $44 that is charged by treatment facility may increase in the future. They control those costs. So this is a total bill impact that they see. So that's why that number looks a little bit lower. we thought the real value here is just to be able to compare over time, not only in the first year, because we do have varying increases over a 5-year period. By the 5th year, we're looking at a 38% increase to bill, the average bill for a resident of 38% up to 57% with the full act. And how does that compare to current rates in other jurisdictions is a question we often get. So the next slide. This is a comparison just for the recommended or the 3 scenarios for the increase that would become effective for the first increase, which would be April 1st, 2026. These are current rates for other jurisdictions in the dark green. You'll notice your current $54.88, again, the 1088 plus the $44 for treatment, compared to other communities. That includes both their collection and treatment as well. The low would be $61.30, then $63.77 for the full ask, and then for the mid ask in the first year, $63.94. And again, because of how we're structuring future increases and phasing them in, you'll see the full ask just in that first year is slightly less than the mid. Again, it's how we phase the rates in for cash flow purposes. But you would remain in the, not at the very low end, but still below Woodland, Elk Grove, Folsom, Lincoln, and Sacramento in that first year. We don't know what the other communities will be doing with their rates, but we know just by looking at all the other communities we work with, everybody's doing some sort of increase over the next 5-year period. You're not the only ones.
Is the infrastructure comparable? The capital?
No, that's why it's very difficult to compare. The question is always asked, but how often are they replacing their infrastructure? Are they in a point where they haven't been maintaining their system and they're about to gear up to do so? So it just depends on their cycles and how they've been able to fund their projects. So we get that question, so we like to compare it, but it's very difficult. Density, house density, how many miles of pipeline has a big impact from community to community. There's different pressure zones. So as much as we like to say it's an apples to apples because it's both collection and treatment, there's a lot of variables. So we'll go through a similar exercise. I'll try and make it a bit more brief since we're familiar with how we're looking at this. Let's look at water. The current water charges, first there is a fixed charge that's based on the meter size. Your residents typically have a 5/8 inch meter or a 3/4 inch meter. So there's that fixed monthly charge of $24.61. Larger multifamily complexes or commercial businesses may need a larger capacity meter up to a 10-inch meter. And those costs increase as the size of the meter increase because you're provided more capacity. You need more capacity of the system, so you should pay a higher fixed charge to accommodate that higher capacity. And again, we're looking at 1 unit of water that all customers are charged, so the fixed plus the volumetric, and it's currently at $2.43 per 748 gallons of water that's used. And that's the same for both residents and businesses. Same situation with sewer. We'll go on to the next slide. Rates have not increased since 2021. Similar looking graph here. We have a lot of capital that needs to occur over the next 5-year period. We are currently meeting with the 25-26 expected costs and revenues. We're meeting the O&M and debt service needs and most of the capital needs, but we are dipping into reserves in 25-26. And we'll need larger increases over the next 4-year period to help bridge that shortfall. Next slide, please. Again, the side-by-side based on the full ask of the city master plan at about 18.6 million per year. Taking a fine-tooth comb on those projects, what are reasonable to be deferred to future years down to 12.6 million per year, or the low end of 7.8 million per year. And again, we've looked at issuing debt in all three cases, from a low of funding 13 million of the projects through debt for the low scenario and 51.5 for the full ask scenario. Next slide. Similar chart here. We have the same O&M target, 25% capital target. On top of that, increasing it to 50%, hitting that blue line. And I did not mention the dotted green line. I think you'll see if you do nothing over the next 5 years, you deplete your reserves by the end of next fiscal year. So we know, again, some sort of increase is necessary. So in this case, again, for 25-26, that's an average increase of 30%, where we had to look at how much of the cost should be borne by commercial versus residential. And then each of the 4 increases thereafter are a uniform percent increase to all rates. This is a bit more extensive discussion. Water.
All right, so to go over the water full CIP ask, I'd like to also mention that for our water, we also have our water treatment plant in the city, so we treat the water there and then have the distribution lines as well. So these projects capture both projects that are just at our plant and projects that are in our distribution system. So in this full ask scenario, we were able to move forward with a lot of our critical projects that we have in the pipeline right now. As Amber mentioned, the high service manifold, I like to think of it as the heart of the water treatment plant because all of our treated water leaves through there. It's like veins. So it pretty much sends everything that's pumped out of our plant through that into our distribution center. So that's our system. And that's a very critical project. So without moving forward to that, we do not move water, right? So that's something that we really need to move forward with. Right now, we are funded with design, and that's some of the work that we're doing right now is design and looking at investigating what the problem is, but we need money to do the project. So this addresses that. It addresses some of our tank projects. So the tanks, they need to be recoated and relined. The pumps need to be redone. So those projects are also handled here as well. A central tank is one of the main ones that we're focusing on that we need to get done critically, and that is addressed in this scenario as well. Along with kind of going down this chart, it gets down into some of our water meter upgrade projects. We have some funding in there currently, but to keep that program going, we need additional years of funding, so that's incorporated in here as well. And then also looking at projects that are to make our plant more efficient. So at the water treatment plant, some alternate energy and solar cells. That's another project that we'd really like to kick off to have some savings in there, and we're able to capture that. So with this, we are able to get quite a bit of funding for our water projects. This would be in the full ask scenario, and then as we walk through the mid ask, we'll see what's changed.
So looking at the mid-ask, we're looking at a cumulative increase of about 52% over the 5-year period in comparison to the full ask, which was at 88% with those percent increases over the 5-year period. Again, we are dipping below the target reserve for a couple of years, but staying well above that O&M threshold of the red line back up to the target by 2930. And as Jay goes into the next slide, the full ask, just as a reminder, is about $93 million in projects. The mid reflects $63 million in capital projects over the 5-year period.
So in the mid-ask, which is the staff recommended ask, this does align with our water and sewer master plan, and then we walk through each one of these projects with Public Works O&M, capital projects to kind of rate them in priority. So the ones that were affected here were some of our tank projects. We're able to move forward with the most critical one, as I mentioned, is our central tank project that we have right now. But we had to reduce some of the future years and the future tanks that we'll be addressing. Our water meter upgrade and replacement project, we're pretty much deferring that to future years and just dealing with the funds that we have right now by adding $1 million. And then also with some of our PSIP tank replacement project, we are deferring that to future years. This also for our annual water repair and replacement projects in the full ask, we had additional funding in there. That would be deferred to future years, and we would just be focusing on the projects on this list.
And the last look at the low capital spending, 56% cumulative increase in revenues compared to the 88% from the full ask. Again, maintaining the target balance by 2930. And deferring an additional 24 million in capital projects.
And in this low ask scenario, this was really tough for staff to make a recommendation on. In this scenario, the only way to make it work was to defund a project that we already have going for the water meter replacement project. So that $5 million that you see there, that's defunded. We would take that money out of that project and split it into projects that we really need, like the high service manifold. That project is not meant to be split in 2 years. So you're seeing that as a $14 million project now instead of a 10. That is because in order to do so, we'd have to have that into bypass for an extended period of time. This would be on any project that we are deferring, you'll see the price of that project has increased significantly. And that is due to that additional mobilization or having to keep something on bypass for multiple years. You'll see that projects such as our alternate fuel cells is just deferred completely. So in this low ask, we do not get very much for our water fund, and we do have to make some difficult decisions on defunding current projects.
What is the impact of deferring the water meter replacement project relative to the ability to collect revenue?
Yeah, that would be, I mean, the meters would be less accurate, also leaks. So if a meter is leaking and it continues to leak, it causes more wear on the infrastructure. So this project wouldn't be completely defunded. It would still have some money in there. About, I think, $3 million is what we'll have left in there. So we could keep a small portion of it going. But ideally, we would need to have that full ask, or I mean, that mid ask to keep it. So to answer your question, we would not be getting accurate readings, and we would still have a lot of leaks.
So it doesn't impact. Does it impact your ability to collect revenue, or?
Yes, replacing meters, so we wouldn't replace at that rate. So yes, it would. That portion of it would affect the ability to collect.
We wouldn't be accurately recording how many of those units of water out, so you wouldn't be accurate true amount.
Right. So is it less or more?
We tend to slow down. So we get customers calling saying, my water bill's high, come check my meter. If your meter is not working, it tends to slow down, which means that your reads will be less, which means we're collecting less revenue from you. And over time, they slow more and more until they fail, and then we're required to go out and replace them. But yes, it would be a significant impact on our ability to collect revenue.
Thank you. That was the question I was asking.
And just to clarify, the collection, sorry, I'll ask it after you present.
I actually have a question on
Yes.
this, on the slide maybe 42. Just wondering if you can share what the rationale was behind, the option of foregoing the annual water system repairs, replacements. It seems critical. Annual repairs.
Yeah, that definitely is a critical project that we would like to keep going. But when compared to the rest of these, when we looked at it with staff. These other ones are very critical as well. So we had to make the tough decision of, do we move funding from there to move forward with the projects that we have here? And that was, in this scenario, that's what we have to do in order to make it work. So that's, and to be clear, that is additional money for other projects that aren't particularly on this list, that are also critical to make it happen, that are in the master plan, but that's additional revenue for CIPs.
Because I read that and I think maintenance, so if something breaks, you don't have the money to fix.
Well, we do
Maybe
have.
that's not what that is?
No, so, well, that's for additional CIP projects. So there's money for emergencies and O&M cost, but that is for additional projects on our list.
System repairs?
Yes.
We're meeting the blue line on the graph, red line on the graph. We
Mhm.
have funding. We have.
Okay. All right. So also, just to clarify, all the yellow highlighted items are the ones that get modified and then in the other graphs.
Correct.
Okay.
The question she raises, so that what it brings to mind in my mind is something that my dad used to say to me all the time, which is a stitch in time saves 9. So what is the impact? I mean, doesn't that just create the cycle of we're not keeping the system maintained and we're not avoiding worse consequences later on by not addressing our annual repairs?
I just want to mention, we put this in the report, but I didn't necessarily mention it here. The full ask scenario is the ideal scenario. When we saw the results of that, and quite frankly, the first time we looked at results, we would double the full utility bill over 5 years. And we said, that's too much. And so when we came up with the 3 scenarios, the low scenario was, what could we do if we wanted to keep our increases to under double digits per year? So we said, okay, 9% per year, what does that give us? It is completely unworkable. We also wanted to look to something that wasn't doubling utility rates over 5 years. And so that's where we looked at issuing more debt, reducing our reserves. So our reserve policy currently, just FYI, and it's written in the report, is 50% of annual O&M, so 6 months of your operations and maintenance cost, plus 1 year of your average spend on the infrastructure. In the last rate study, that average annual spend was much lower than what we're proposing today. If we maintained that same reserve level, you're looking at millions more in the reserve, because the average annual CIP spend is so much higher. So we looked at best practices and said, hey, we can actually reduce the amount that we are proposing to hold aside in reserves so we can use some of that money. We looked at issuing more debt and then tried to figure out, is there a middle ground? I will tell you that all the staff here, their ideal scenario is the full ask scenario. And if I was sent back to look at that, I could probably get those rates reduced by issuing more debt in the full ask scenario. But overall, we were trying to look at what is the right balance between getting us the revenue that we need to maintain a reliable system, build in to a point that after this 5 years, we're getting closer to having the amount of pay-as-you-go revenue coming in to keep up with what we believe our average annual infrastructure investment needs to be based on our master plans, but also have a rate increase that's palatable for you, for our council, for our citizens. And so we were really trying to balance all 3 of those, and that's where we came with the mid scenario. So yes, it's not perfect. It's not ideal. It is taking haircuts in certain places where we figured we could do that without a lot of risk, but it's not the ideal scenario. So yeah, we would certainly recommend that all these things are done, that they're all done on the time frame, as quick as possible, those types of things. But we're trying to balance all of those pieces, which is why our middle scenario is recommended, but it doesn't quite get all the way to what the master plans say we should have. So we were really, and you can provide whatever feedback you want, right? If you say, well, I think you should do these types of things, that's good information to have so that we can develop a scenario that we hope will be palatable for council and for citizens. But it's been a balancing act to just try and get there.
And
So,
we
yeah.
understand, we're not trying to be critical, it's just we're trying to understand the decision-making process. It's very, I mean, you guys are experts at this. This is, this is like Greek to some people. So I appreciate that, but I think we're just trying to understand the nuances and the trade-offs that you've been doing throughout the balance.
And does the debt financing require a bond measure to be passed?
No, we don't. It doesn't have to go to the ballot, but we've included scenarios that assume issuing bonds, but we would ultimately look at all kinds of options. So there, with a state revolving fund, they have low interest loans that can get money that would allow us to do a little bit more with the capital. So if we're able to finance at 2 or 3% instead of 5%, that gives us a little bit of extra money that allows us to do
All the
maybe
meters.
some of the things that aren't currently included.
All right, again, the side-by-side of the low, we do see quite the disparity here on the water side in that fifth year between the mid and the full ask. So again, that's the decision-making of which projects are most critical that led to the mid recommendation for water. In that first year, the average customer at average water use, of course, you use water differently during the year. So during the winter time, lower water use, summertime, higher water use, but the average bill would increase. We targeted a very low increase to help keep the overall utility bill increase below 9% or below double digits. For a 4% in that first year, but again, to make up for that in the fifth year on the low scenario, rates would be up by 59%, or bills will be up by 59%. With the mid, the first year, 20%, and then 55% and greater for full ask. So comparing to others, again, the chart is looking at other jurisdictions with the current at, again, average water use, which is 11 of these squares here per month, $51.34 would increase with the low, $53.54, the mid, $61.40, and if we go with the full ask as of April 1st, $68.62. So bringing you from the lower end of your neighbors towards the higher end, but still lower than Lincoln, Elk Grove, and Woodland. Next slide. Let's look at the bills combined, because the utility bill does include both water and sewer. Looking at the other communities with the current of $106.22, if we go with the low, increasing to $114.99, about an $8 per month increase, up to $123.86, about $17 per month increase, again, for both water and sewer. And then jumping for the full ask to $132.27 per month for both utilities, about a $26 per month increase. Again, this is looking at just the next year, moving from the lower end, depending on which scenario selected, still below a few of your neighboring agencies. And just the last slide, looking at what staff is recommending, using the mid, we wanted to also include that fifth year, because just in full transparency, we don't want the takeaway for people to be, well, that's not that big of an increase in year one. We do want the full transparency that we have double-digit percentage increases looking for the next 5 years. So we just wanted to add that mid, again, this is just for the mid scenario. In that fifth year, rates would be at an average bill of $157.18. Again, this is comparing to current rates at those jurisdictions. We would anticipate their rates would also go up by the fifth year. So still landing yourself lower than Elk Grove and Woodland at their current rates, it's likely City of Sacramento and Lincoln would be increasing something during that 5-year period. Next slide. Before we move on to next steps, I just want to open up, that's a lot of information, discussion on capital, great questions. If you have any other questions specific to the slides I just reviewed. Get into next steps. Great, thank you.
All right. So that was a lot of information. I appreciate how engaged you've all been and the questions that you've been asking throughout this process. We have time for more, and so, and of course, a lot of people here, but I really appreciate how deep you've been digging into this. Just to give you an idea of where we are in this process, I don't know if you're aware of it, but we do have a utility rates website that is providing information to the public about this rate study process and about what's coming up. And so we've got a schedule of events on there. A couple weeks ago, October 28th, this group held a webinar for folks. It's recorded and posted on the utility rates webpage. Just doing a lot of education about the system, about the process, to engage with ratepayers so they have more information about, you know, what their money goes to fund. So we did that a couple weeks ago. They have links to all the information that's presented to you tonight on that website as well. We plan to come back in a couple of weeks to go to City Council to do a workshop with them that would include the feedback that we get from you tonight. And then assuming that goes well and we get direction from the City Council, at that point, we will be issuing Proposition 218 notices, which is a required part of the process, early in January. In late January, early February, we would hold some outreach sessions in a couple different areas in the town where folks can come in and talk with us about the proposed rates, what they're going to go to fund, you know, ask all the questions. And then we would plan to come back to the City Council to have the protest hearing and ask the City Council to adopt the rates at the March 18th meeting. If adopted, those rates would become effective April 1st, and they would be billed. So the first bill that you'd see those rates on would be the May bill, and we would get our first revenue from the increased rates in June. So that's the time frame. I don't think we have anything else. I think that's about it. So now we'd love to open it up for any more questions and discussion and feedback from you.
So I'll lead it off. The forward-looking part of me is gunning for full ask, right? I can see where there is a large potential future savings to be had in not deferring these projects and all the externalities that they bring for preventing future failures, future overtime calls for staff. What kind of support is there for bringing not necessarily a full ask before City Council, but something between the mid and full? Because the mid still defers some things that I think would be more beneficial, but what kind of level of support and desired willingness to bring forward do the city staff have for a mid versus a blended mid-full scenario?
City staff would be supportive of bringing forward something
And what's
that
the
includes a
likelihood
little
of-
bit more. I think our
What's the likelihood of
concern,
that being brought forward successfully?
right? I don't know. You know, we don't necessarily get to pull the councils in advance. That there's Brown Act and other things. They've got to have these conversations publicly. So we'll know more about that after our workshop in February. However, I would say if there is support at this level to do something more than the mid-ask, then that certainly would bode well for hopefully support at that level. But I can't really say.
The other aspect of that then has to do more broadly with the customer base for the city. You know, for certain people in certain income brackets, they look at an increase of, you know, $10 a month and they go, well, you know, okay, it's a couple cups of coffee. But for certain, you know, economic categories of our city, that's a very impactful increase, particularly when we start talking about the compounding effects throughout year 5. Do we have any idea of how that disparity is going to be borne out? You know, what percentage of our city is of a lower income where that would be more impactful? And is there maybe a program that we could tap into to help offset that burden on more disadvantaged or lower income communities relative to the rest of the city population that might be more able to bear that.
I'm sure there are some staff who have data on that. I don't actually know sort of the split, but I know overall, you know, we get concerned about the residents in the north and the older part of town versus, you know, Southport where they've got CFDs and other things, newer homes. But I don't know what that split is. We do have a low income rate assistance program currently that we would plan to continue. In fact, we'll be looking at that to see if there needs to be adjustments made to that for any reason. It's not, so it's currently available with limited documentation. If a customer says they're on the CARE program for PG&E, then we say, okay, you qualify, we'll give you the low income discount. And so we'll add that to the bill. I can say that I don't think that is utilized as much as it could be. And so one of the things that we can certainly do is tout that a little bit more, get some more outreach about the availability of that, which is something that we will do during our outreach sessions as well. When people come, our biggest thing is making sure they're aware of all of the benefits that are available to them, you know, these low-income programs, getting your bill online, all kinds of other things, the programs that Ryan does to help reduce your energy costs and help you find ways where you can save. So we do have a program currently that we would plan to continue. I imagine we'll be looking at that too to see if with the proposed rates, do we need to increase or decrease, you know, the amount of money that's available for that program. That funding does need to come from another source, so it has to be subsidized from general fund. Currently, it comes from Measure K. A portion of the Measure K transaction and use tax that was adopted was to offset utility bills and assessments for low-income residents. So we do have that in place. But I don't know the percentages, and I can certainly do more digging to understand how much of our population might be impacted.
I think just given the fact that that program exists and could be tapped into, I think with a mix of outreach supporting that and then just obviously looking at the cold hard cash aspect of it, I think that would go a long way towards addressing that palatability issue that we talked about, particularly for that first year rate realignment. I think that might be something that could help get you closer to a full ask scenario, just because that is going to be the hardest blow, right? Kind of once you overcome that initial inertia and get the rate increase and the capital improvement projects rolling, I think that'll be the main hurdle. I think that would be a good place to work.
Okay. I do want to mention too, if you look at the 5-year impact of each of the scenarios, the mid ask that we're recommending is actually about the same increase over the 5 years as the low ask. It just happens that most of the pain is in the first year, and then we ramp down to more palatable rate increases. It gets us more money over the time, but it's actually the lowest. Slightly lowest increase overall. But if you have specific recommendations about things that you would recommend us adding into our middle scenario or recommended scenario, that would be helpful to understand too.
Okay. I'll look back through here, but I'll open up to other questions.
Well, to that, I think the meters, like the full meter updates, because you get so much from it. So it really just helps the whole budgeted scenario. So, and it didn't seem like it was a lot. It was a smaller number, I thought.
That was about $1 million for that one.
Yeah. I just wanted to put something out here, and I don't know that I have a great way to ask it, but it was something that came to me early on when we're looking at all of the needs. When we're thinking about the age of the infrastructure and, you know, maybe hasn't been updated in so long since the beginning. It came with the city incorporation and things like that. I just feel like, you know, average West Sactonian might just say, well, what have we been doing with all of the income all this time? Why have we waited so long to update so much? And I don't know how, like, percentage of the 200 and something miles and the X amount of pumps and lifts and all the things. But I mean, I don't know, I just think that there may be other citizens that might just wonder, oh, all of a sudden now we have to fix everything now. So I guess I'm just wondering, how much have we been replacing along the way as we've been growing?
I can certainly open it up to my colleagues to answer that. I will say that we haven't had a lot of capital dollars to put into that. I think in the past, and especially the last two rate increases, and of course those were before my time, but in speaking with staff who was here and understanding, reading the reports and looking at what direction we received from council, the direction really was to keep rates low. They wanted to keep rates low for customers. They wanted to not impact them after the Great Recession, where the city lost a lot of money during that time as well. And it was kind of a long crawl out of that. And so by 2017, I think the direction again was to keep rates low. We did issue some debt at that time, and we've been able to use that to invest in some infrastructure projects. But the last few years, we've been really just tied without having a lot of funds to invest. So, but that is helpful information for us to actually look into what have we done as far as replacement of the system. And I don't know if anyone here has that data today, but we can certainly pull a lot of that together. And I appreciate that comment.
Yeah, further presentations, further public presentations where we're having a big ask. Even if it's the mid option, it's still going to impact everybody, at home. And so, to be able to say,
Yeah. I'd also mention if you have a home, and I have a home, the longer you wait to invest in the things that might need, things start falling apart all at once. And it's almost, Murphy's Law. It knows that you've waited and, oh, you're going to fix that? Okay, well, I'm going to break too. And I think a lot of it has to do with, especially in a system like this, it's very connected. And so when you start seeing or start doing some of these replacements and you're going to show flaws in a weak system, we have to be prepared to respond to the other pieces that that are going to have impacts once we start investing in our system.
And I think to your point, I think regardless of what ask scenario you go forward with, the transparency is going to be the way out of that, right? In terms of focusing on what have we done, why couldn't we do more even if we'd wanted to, and why are we taking the approach that we're taking now in order to proactively put our city not on the back foot, but moving forward in a responsible way, right?
In the past, we've been asked to defer maintenance, and I think the city was really focusing on producing these new cool projects, which we still are, but there's now a need because we've deferred maintenance so long that we have to catch up or things are just going to continue to break. And we haven't had that many emergencies yet, which is great, knock on wood. But it's getting to the point where, our master planners, which are engineers from companies that do this for cities all over the place, are saying, it's time. You got ticking time bombs under your ground. And what I like to say is, you notice like the condition of some of these streets that we haven't maintained in a long time. Well, think about what the sewer and water lines look like underneath it. So it's just deferred maintenance, and it's something that the city kind of had a history of doing for a long time, and we don't want to do that anymore.
At the end of the day, it's not cool and exciting to take care of your basic infrastructure, right? But it's critically necessary, and I think that's the messaging, right?
Exactly.
Did you have what to say?
Yeah, I think what you just laid out was a good messaging strategy for you as you all go out into the public, and that is to present a package that recognizes that this is going to be a hardship for some people, and it's not a good time. I mean, the fact that you've tried to predict 5 years ahead and even into 10 years, it's chaotic to try to project anything anymore. Some of the issues that people that know me know that I'm very much involved in climate change, and one of the areas that I've been involved in is sea level rise. So one of the things reading about sea level rise is that we're not on the sea, but we're on the delta, and we have riverine we're relying on our riverine access for our water supply, for one thing. But the other thing is that it may not look like it should affect this, but the fact is that the saltwater intrusion coming from sea level rise has the ability to lift our groundwater supply so that they infiltrate more into the sewage system, which is why I was so interested in the Vault project. So I'm like really interested in getting the Vault project up and going. I mean, the design is done, let's get it done, and as well as the lift project on the sewer side. So you need to tell the story, and I think you can't tell the story without the recognition that some people are going to be devastated by that impact, especially. We are a community, I live in Broderick, we are a community that qualifies for disadvantaged community. We have disadvantaged community eligibility because of the percentage of our population that is on free lunch and SNAP and the other social services support. So I think understanding who they are and what percentage of our population that they are and how we can assist, because I think from a narrower strategic point of view, you've made all the right decisions, and you've tried to adjust your scenarios in a way that reflects reality. This is not unique to West Sacramento. The entire country has put its infrastructure, including our electric utilities, on deferred maintenance, which is why we're having more wildfire problems and a few other things that are happening. Bridges are falling down. It's been endemic ever since, and even before the recession. So I think you've done a great job of trying to put something together that will put us in a good place and to some level of reliability under difficult circumstances. But you need to tell the story, and it needs to address some of the issues that we're raising with respect to especially the people that are going to be, impacted. Even it's not a huge imposition, for me, and hopefully for, some of my colleagues here, but $10 a month, these days, it can mean a lot to a family that's having trouble putting food on a table. So I think you need to be prepared to address that issue and what the city is going to do to support those people that are going to be impacted the most. And then the other story is, why we need these improvements now in order to forestall emergencies and disasters that could come that we can even anticipate because of the condition of our system as it is, but even going forward, impacts that we are difficult to project with respect to what the impact of climate change and temperature variations and saltwater intrusion and a few other things, extreme weather, high rainfall. There's a lot that you just can't nail down in order to make those comparisons. So you need to tell the story, and you need to have some, mitigating programs available and resources available to support those for whom this is going to be a huge burden.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think as part of telling that story, just having residents, particularly those of a lower socioeconomic status, know that they're not alone and left to deal with this change all on their own, right? That there is a program available. The specific program that I would have liked to see moved from the mid to the high was the Bright Lift Station. And I think that's another part of that story, especially if you're looking at, a more disadvantaged community. You say, we are doing something directly to help the health of your infrastructure in your neighborhood. And I think that makes that sell a little bit easier. And that is something that I could see there was a several $1 million increase in deferring that over 2 years, spreading that out and shifting it later in the time scale. So I think that would be one that I'd like to see kept on the full ask scenario time scale as maybe a blend of the two.
Yes, I'm wondering if one of the scenarios you have is just full debt financing and then spread it out. So I would say, can you look at each of these infrastructure spend and say, that's a 30 years to replace. Let's amortize that over 30 years to replace that and build that into a lower rate over time and just debt finance everything right now.
Depending on
We
how the
can't
interest is
do that,
scheduled,
unfortunately. To debt finance, so we, when we look at this, and especially looking at multiple years, there's several things that we have to balance within that model too. And so when you do debt financing, we have to meet minimum coverage requirements, which means legally, if we have, say, $2 million annual debt service payment, we have to have net revenues, so revenues minus operating expenses, that is equal to like 135% of that in order to meet our legal debt coverage requirement. And so to debt finance everything, we'd actually have to raise rates, I think, quite a bit more to meet the coverage requirements in some of those years. So, and I mean, relying solely on debt is also not necessarily fiscally responsible. So we do try and balance each of those pieces to make sure that we're being fiscally responsible and that we can meet our legal requirements when we're issuing debt. You have more?
I guess that was the thing, that there's a cost. You have the minimum, medium, high, or the ideal. If you don't do the ideal, then that bucket, the cost of that bucket goes up. There's a difference there. So how much is that bucket going to increase simply because you choose one or the other one? So I'm trying to figure out what is the decision points to make? What is the actual decision points if I purely financial first? And then the second is that rate that the payers have to do. Of course, you're dividing it.
Depends on, are you taking a long-term or short-term view?
Well, that's what I was trying to get to, the debt. If you had, and that was proposed early, is it possible to do the debt and then spread it out over the lifetime, a longer lifetime, not just the 5 years?
No, because of the capital coverage requirements, right? And then amortization could probably kill you over the long term.
So that's the issue. You cannot distribute that cost beyond 5 years. So even though this cost, you're trying to make it up in 5 years, it came over 30 years of deferred, whatever, many decades of deference. And now you're trying to capture it. The equations are 5 years only.
It's not, though. I mean, we're looking at a 5-year time frame. So the capital that we plan to fund from rates on a pay-as-you-go basis, that's within the 5 years. If we do debt financing, that is typically over a longer time frame. So we've modeled bond financing amortized over 30 years. So what that means is we're able to get a lot more money up front because we're going to pay for that over 30 years versus over 5 years. But even so, when we're looking at that, we're limited to how much our debt service payment can be on an annual basis based on our rates and our operating costs to make sure that we're meeting our debt coverage. There are a million and one ways to slice this, right? I can certainly look at more debt. And depending on what we ultimately take to council, depending on some of the recommendations here and from our council, if they're wanting us to add additional capital costs in, then we would have to look at additional debt most likely. But there are so many ways to slice it. We just have to make sure we're meeting all of our legal requirements throughout the process.
I guess that's what I was looking at. So you have the spreadsheet that's very step-based. So whereas if you're looking at a different spreadsheet, it says, what are my requirements as a city? So one, if the requirement from the staff is, I need the ideal scenario, but the city also says, I want the lowest rate possible. So in that scenario, you have that it's not, it's a spectrum almost. It's like, okay, where are we going to put the needle on? And then what's it going to cost us? So I'm almost looking for that spreadsheet that says, oh, this is more granular, that says, oh no, this is the best rate because this more ideal, palatable, whatever it is. And just to let you know, I definitely would support if you could have funds for those who cannot afford it, who are in areas or, $100 is going to break the bank. They're going to have to move. And those are people that we need to consider, and that should be included in the decision. But I would go with the ideal ones because we painted ourselves in a hole. I think that's the story here. There's a master plan. there's deferred maintenance, we're stuck. And if we do anything less, there's going to be more to pay every single 5-year period. We're pushing it and we're increasing it. So at some point, it's just going to be really we can't. It's just out of control. So that's the concern I have for the long term. And I'm sure some of the residents may not care because they're only here. Maybe they think, oh, I'm going to be gone 3 years. Who cares? But there's some that's going to be here for quite a while. And in terms of the infrastructure, I think, yeah, nobody's going to move to West Sacramento because it's got the best funded infrastructure for water and sewer. But when those things break, that's one reason they'll go somewhere else. And I think that's the key part here is that you want to avoid that and then also capture that narrative. And if there's you have the spreadsheets, of course. So if there's a granular point where the city council can see, it's like, no, what are the more fine tuning that we could do with this, and where can we see that and make that decision? Because you have 3 stages here. Can I make the decision? I would definitely, personally, I prefer if it was me, I'd say I need to find the money. And frankly, and I think I saw that in some behavioral financing, it's like it's better to charge everything up front and then nothing. So ramp up and do nothing, because increasing every year is a pain. Every single time you're going to go out there and say, hey, we're going to raise it again. Like,
You'll never be at a point where you can do everything now and then nothing after, because it's a life cycle. So these things
well, you
are
have
in
a
a
5-year
continuous
rate.
need to be repaired and replaced. I think that we have certainly higher costs now, so there's a higher investment that needs to be made now, but our goal is to get to a place where we're making that investment, getting these things out of the way and getting on a good preventative maintenance and replacement schedule so that we can keep our rate increases lower going forward. And when you talk about the ideal scenario, that's really hard. It's very subjective. And any finance person, different consultants, bankers, anybody will come up and have a different ideal scenario for debt. Some people say don't issue debt at all. Some people say, oh, rely on debt heavily. There's somewhere in between, and it is very subjective. So we are doing I think that there is room on the full ask scenario to increase debt and probably do more with lower rates than what are shown there. I don't know necessarily what that looks like. There's some wiggle room potentially if we want to issue more debt. And so we'll take your feedback and see what that looks like. I definitely appreciate the feedback and the willingness to get in and take care of the things that we've not been able to take care of and do it.
Or proactively
now.
touching on financing as well, and this might be something, Ryan, that maybe there's an opportunity for collaboration here. Given kind of what Suzanne identified about, climate change impacts on, city safety, water table rising, higher likelihood of flood events, and maybe an inability of sewer systems to deal with a larger influx of rainwater all at once or flood water, is there a potential for a grant-based supplemental fund to help with any of this? I don't know what the grant landscape looks like in your world right now. I know what it looks like in my world, but and it's not great. But is there some sort of opportunity out there where maybe there could be grant funds that you could bring the expertise and the knowledge and the critical needs identified in the master plan and dovetail that with the climate action plan and your plans for essentially future-proofing the city against climate change?
Yeah, great question. So I know Prop 4 contains extreme climate events, and our climate action plan, the last goal, it has to do with dealing with stuff now. And there is someone within the fire department who's in charge of our emergency responses, and she's actively trying to find funds. So that's definitely on the table. So as Prop 4 goes through its rotation of different grant cycles, we could definitely explore ways in which, extreme weatherization proofing our city could somehow trickle down to, people on the north side of town. The other thing I wanted to say is, in my time doing just waterways house calls, these rate increases are not, it's not fate. A lot of people their indoor water use is around 5,000 gallons per month. And historically, the outdoor water use is like 30,000. So educating residents on the north side of town to just, reduce their irrigation schedule can save them $20 a month. And then you add on top of that the free light bulbs, the power stripping. There are things that we can do that I would love to do for people that are in that more, I think what I'm hearing is you guys want to do the full ask, but you're concerned how that's going to affect the people in need. And I certainly am passionate and would love to come in the middle of that and be able to provide free resources, free education to those residents to get their bills as low as possible, so that they're not being punished for us kind of playing catch up with what we need to do.
Yeah, I think as part of, again, going back to telling this story, right? I think if these residents, whoever they may be, are directed to you and to the home energy audit and being water wise and, potential subsidies for rates for disadvantaged community members, I think you can make ripping that Band-Aid off a lot less painful. And I would recommend taking that approach to council, especially if you're going with something more akin to a full ask, which I'm with you in that I would love to have the full ask. The long-term view part of me is like, fix all of the stuff that needs to be fixed, because the externalities of fixing it now are going to save us a lot more money long-term. But that Band-Aid ripping off is much more painful under that scenario because that realignment is much more severe, right?
And we have to remember.
Or the debt is much more significant that
We have to remember what Ryan brought up in his first presentation, is that they're just now getting an out person. So as much as, as ideal as it would be to have this service and outreach and take care of the folks that need to be taken care of in the full ask scenario, I don't know that it's possible. The city can only do as much as they can do. And it doesn't sound to me that we have the staffing to do that. There are some programs and that's wonderful, but the outreach for it, I hear that.
Ryan, you're passionate, but how passionate mixed with how able are you in terms of your schedule to organize some sort of outreach in that way? Or are there people that you could work with to organize that outreach?
Yeah, I mean,
Is it feasible?
I'm the sustainability manager and I'm doing house calls now because it's important. If there's demand, then we'll make it happen. So I think my staff person, I think it would be reasonable for them to do 100 home energy audits per year. That relieves pressure on my other staff members. The other staff members can also do, I'm planning on getting trained on home energy audit. We're going to have at least 2 staff members trained on it. So that could be increased up to 200, 250. And then something else, just for a sense of perspective, I'm working on the new waste hauler contract, and I think utility billing confirmed for me that the people that are participating in the current subsidy is around 200 people. So I don't know if it's because people don't know about it or people are choosing not to, but we don't have a huge amount of people that are currently participating in the finance hub. So it may, not to say that paints the full picture, but it's not like there's thousands of people that are currently taking advantage of that program. So something to think about.
But based on current demand and usage, it would be feasible to continue outreach at kind of the pace that you identified and hopefully be able to get some people audited, reducing their bills, maybe informing them about other programs that exist that they could get attached.
Right.
Good.
Yeah, I think just acknowledging that you understand that there's a problem and that you're working to address it
Right.
is a good first step.
And I think if you can cohesively present that argument kind of collectively to council, I think it'll be easier to make it sell.
Yeah. Well, I'm certainly,
I can't speak for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly part of the strategy for me, from the climate perspective, is like trying to frame all this through your bill, because that is very impactful and meaningful for people. And I do believe on the water side, on the energy side, there's significant savings just from behavior change. You don't even have to upgrade things. If you just change your behavior, we can drop $20, $30 from people's bills.
Just a question on the water utilization and rate. It was mentioned that centicubic feet, is that, it's not, we're not billed per gallon, we're still billed on the CCF? So I had that issue, and I actually brought it up to the city council where I think at that time it was drought and we're asked to save 15%. And the report at that time, because of the old meters, like, it's the same CCF. Like, how could I save and how could I get my input? Now, the other issue now is that I'm still billed at this quantity. And like, well, if I save 10%, I don't really save 10% because it's a fixed step amount of water. So I don't know if that's a calculation that could be changed. It says bill me per actual use versus this step cost that says it's a CCF.
Well, what's the resolution on the measurement for meters? I'm not familiar. Is it like 1.2345 CCF or is it one or
No,
two?
it's cubic feet. Some meter, my understanding is, and this is one of the other reasons that we have a lot invested into the meter replacement program, is we've got some meters that, and there's meters, and then there's the registers. They read with the towers, some of them don't, but some of them will read in CCF, some of them read in CCF. So those who, and so only certain ones allow you access into the portal that allows you to see how you're using your water. So folks with certain types of meters can't actually see that right now. So our goal is to actually replace all of those water meters so that they're all reading the same cubic feet, so people get the insight into their bill and if they're actually saving, because it's really hard to see if you use less than 100 cubic feet, right? If you're saving, you don't necessarily get billed differently or see that difference. So the question about billing in a different unit, that is way bigger than me right now, but having insight into it, that's part of the meter and register replacement program, is so that everybody has billed, is tracked the same way, so that everyone has access to the census portal to be able to see their usage and see their usage over time. The different, probably ultimately is me as far as how we build, but I'm not prepared to answer that. I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, my question is just on the resolution of it. Is it, down to an individual cubic foot is what you're charged on? If so, then you would be able to see your reduction in usage.
And we
It's
couldn't
a
even
fraction.
do that right now because the meters do not all the meters do that. But once they're all replaced, our goal is to at least have them all read the same unit, the same level.
So with the new units, you could do fractions of the centicubic feet as a billing.
No.
It's still one full.
No, they're measuring in cubic feet, so 1/100th of that, if I'm understanding
cubic
correctly,
feet,
right?
okay.
So you can
it's not
see
the
down to a
centicubic.
resolution of 1/100th of that,
Okay.
essentially.
So that's fine. So I'm just saying, in the situation before, it was one of those big things. That was the unit. And you couldn't.
And it still is for a lot of folks until we
still
get
is,
the meter replacement
And
project.
it's billed in that way?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's just either 1 or 2, even if you were at 1.51, it rounds up to
Yes.
2?
Yeah.
and it was-
I
So
didn't know
just
that.
to be
For any unit
clear,
or portion thereof.
I think Suzanne and I both have the recommendation to keep the meter replacement. Okay, even if we go mid.
No, that's mine too.
Okay,
I would
okay,
not like that.
okay.
It's- I mean,
Just
the whole
make-
goal was the low scenario is just not an option. It's not working.
Question, you're just a little bit over
Come to the mic.
It's $2.50 for that one unit that you'd be
Oh, per each.
over.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not like, I hear what you're saying, but someone's not going to pay an exorbitant amount.
Yeah.
It's cheaper for this than it is. Especially if you get it at a.
Yeah, but it speaks to the, if I'm trying to save, I also get the feedback that I did save.
Yeah.
How's that?
Meter.
We used to just have a flat rate, and so there really wasn't a lot of incentive to save water. But now that we have the consumptive section, I can show people that their bill is going to drop by a certain percentage. So they are actually being rewarded for the usage in water drop. And then the other component, is that we can't just artificially raise rates because of Prop 218. We'd like to, certainly I've seen a lot of very heavy water users, and it'd be nice to start taxing them higher for that water abuse, but we can't. So,
You proposing the future rate has a step cost if you have abusive
no,
amounts that you charge more?
I'm saying we can't do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Related to the Prop 218 notices that you have to send out, can that be something where you could send a mailer or something with that notice to help explain that story?
Yeah, yes. I mean, yes. And our plan, I think, is we're still reviewing the Prop 218 notice, but we can include anything in there. We did plan to also include information as far as the outreach sessions that are coming up. So when they get their notice, they also know how to come and talk to us and ask questions and find out more. But there will also be a bill calculator, so they'll be able to go on and take their last bill and say, okay, if this is adopted, what does my next bill look like? And so they'll be able to do some scenarios too, as far as if I do save and I use a unit less, what does that look like? But yes, but there's the opportunity, if we're mailing, we can mail.
You could send out, potential information for check out the home energy audit, look into getting your water meter checked, or, reducing your sprinklers. Put the
Zero escaping your yard.
Yeah, put the link tree of available resources and available to, right? Or direct them to the CAP website, something, right? We could.
I know it's late, and I want to thank you all for taking the time to present this information to us. After reading through the materials that were provided with the agenda, I had a lot of questions, and you did a great job answering most of the questions that I had. So I guess my encouragement to you would be to include as much of the background material that you presented in the slides in the written materials that will go to council. Because, what are the rates currently? That wasn't in the materials. How were those rates set? Or, there was some information about the last time they were updated, but I thought that kind of what you went over in the slides was really helpful. I do have some very specific feedback on the written materials that were provided. There's representations of the 5-year rate increases and percentages per year. In the staff report, those percentages were summed to get a 5-year total, and that's not accurate for how percentages work over 5 years. So just take a look at that. There was also a discrepancy where the central water tank rehab project was listed as $5 million in one section and $3 million in another. I think just making sure that the numbers are consistent. And then, I thought you did a good job here of explaining the low scenario and how the projects were determined for what would be included in the low scenario. And I felt like we just want to keep it below a double-digit increase per year. Just kind of feels disingenuous to me, of like that you get the minimum value in terms of projects, but in the end, at the end of the 5 years, you've still raised rates more than under the mid scenario, right? So I think more, hey, these are the bare essential projects, and we would still have to raise rates significantly over 5 years is maybe a better, just my personal feeling of why you chose that scenario than just to keep the numbers below, the percentages below a certain amount. And I think you also did a great job of explaining, how you prioritize projects for each of the scenarios. So really appreciate that. And then I just want to my personal opinion would be the mid scenario is the one to go with. I think that, yes, it would, in an ideal world, we would do everything over the next 5 years. But as we've seen with the potential rate increases, that's just not realistic, I think, for most people in the community to be able to shoulder, particularly by year 5. I think you could probably handle, year 1 is substantial in the mid scenario, but by year 5, it is still a over 50% increase over what folks are paying today. And I think if you go with the high, and that is more than doubling current rates, I think that is just a really difficult decision for the city to make, and then a really difficult decision that people have to make of, yes, they might be able to reduce their water use or their energy use and save some money. But when the bill comes due, like that is something that you really need to pay, and you need to think about what other things would you have to sacrifice. So, I think the mid scenario is great, and maybe there's some tinkering there to add in some other priority projects, either through a slight rate difference or additional debt financing. But I think, again, ideally we do everything, but the mid is I think, a nice compromise between the rate increase that's needed and getting those essential projects done. So appreciate that being one of the options. And then, I know it's late, one very specific question. In the report, it talked about the commercial sewer rates. We're sort of rebalancing how those will be assessed, and residential would pay more. Can you just give a little more detail about kind of what has changed and why that shift is happening or proposed to happen?
Yeah, great question. So with the realignment, typically you do these every 5 years. We're looking at costs in one point in time, what types of costs are being incurred and who's receiving the services. So with sewer, though you don't do treatment, the collection system, with the fog, the fats, oil, and grease coming more from commercial than residential, there's additional treatment costs associated with commercial. So there's assumptions made at each cost of service analysis about how that's going to change over time. Since it's been about 8 years, things have slowly get out of alignment. That's why it's recommended to do them every 5 years. So we're just seeing a greater variance, and I'll mention the commercial. The last time that was done, there was no fixed charge for commercial sewer, so there was a nominal $5 per month fixed charge. There wasn't a lot of data at that time to know what that possibly could be. So that was just a guess at that time. We're seeing it should be a little bit lower. But again, that's just the fixed portion. The bulk of their bill is based on the variable amounts of water that they use. So it's kind of twofold. The last time the commercial fixed charge was a bit of an estimate at that time. Now 8 years later, costs associated with treatment, cleaning those pipes, were less in comparison to the proportion of the cost for residential. So it's just widened that gap a bit. So that's why we're seeing a little bit higher on the residential and a little bit lower on. So it's a point in time and gets realigned.
All right, thank you.
Is that a fair assessment? So the sewage rate is based on the water utilization, but if it's a business that has a lot of outdoor, we don't have, let's say it's an outdoor venue and they have a lot of landscaping, it's still assumed that the water use contributes to the sewage use.
No. So sewage is based on winter water use. I don't recall if in this case, it's a full, every bill is based on actual water use or winter water use. Yeah. So the typical to estimate as a proxy, because sewer is not metered.
Right.
As a proxy, we looked at the winter water use of those commercial customers. That's how they get billed. That became our denominator on where that rate should be set.
Thank you.
Just wanted to confirm.
So just more broadly, before we wrap this up, we could maybe just get an idea of where our own personal recommendations are for things to look forward. I know we've identified a couple of key things that we kind of all would like the full, it sounds like, but the mid is more realistic, maybe with some additions like the water meters, the bright lift station, I've identified for myself. Anything else that we would feel like we would want to advance more towards city council with our recommendation beyond the mid scenario as it's identified?
I just want to clarify the assumption I have on the full. If we don't do the full, after 5 years, there's going to be an even higher cost. And then if they don't do the full, the costs keep going up because we're deferring and the cost keeps going up. So there's going to be a really bad 5-year period somewhere down the line is the assumption.
But the way I understand it is that there's all the capital investment projects that are going to get improved for the next 5 years. At the end of 5 years, and then they do their next assessment and we come to the next rate increases, I don't know that they're going to be more than what we saw here because we're at a different level of newness and functionality. And the need, I don't think, is going to be as great. I don't know who knows that, and that's what several people have talked about. It's very difficult to project the next 5 years, even let alone even this one. It's still just a projection. But is that right that for the next 5-year plan of increases, it's not necessarily true that it will be greater than what we're going to see in this 5-year period?
Correct. The master plans give us essentially the infrastructure that needs to be done over the next 10 years, right? And we look at those about every 5. So we'll redo master plans and kind of see what those say in the next 5 years. But we're building up to, in these rate scenarios, building up to a much higher annual investment in infrastructure for each utility that will continue after this 5-year period, supported by the rates that are in place at that time. So it is true that anything that in the full ask was in this first 5 years, if it's not in the first 5 years, it gets pushed out a little bit. When you push it out, costs tend to go up, but it's really hard for us to estimate that right now. Right now, there's a lot of other volatility that's impacting those costs that could go away, perhaps. I mean, so it's really hard to look at that. But yeah, in general, if you're deferring maintenance and pushing it out, then it's going to cost you more at the time you go do it. But I don't think that I think we're proposing some more significant rates now over the next 5 years to build up to a higher annual investment in each of these systems that we think will be more sustainable over time and get us to where we're being better stewards of our system and doing the maintenance and replacement on a as needed basis versus or preventative basis versus doing it later. So I think, yeah, you'll continue to see some. It is true that it's going to cost a little bit less now than it would in perhaps 5 or 7 years, but I don't think that we're gearing ourselves up to have a more significant impact in rate impact in the future. I think we're doing that now. We'll still have to increase rates over time to keep up with the rising costs because they're gonna rise over time. But I think that this is taking a big step towards setting ourselves up so that we've got the money on an annual basis to be able to do the preventative maintenance we need.
So that O&M budget's larger, right?
Yeah.
I think there were sort of two sorts of conversations going on. One is about exactly what the decision is with respect to the scenarios, and the other was how to message and tell the story of why and what and how it's going to impact and what we're doing about it, and what the benefit of whatever the final proposal is to the community and reliability of our water supply. So I think that we pretty much agreed on. I was interested in the proposal that if it's within your capacity to do so, doing a range between the mid and the high that might take some of the projects that we individually thought was a priority. So is that, or do you have the capacity to do that scenario? And do you understand, have we articulated which of the
essentially
projects?
the mid plus the water meters not deferred and plus the bright lift station not deferred.
And I know there was concern in the with that annual investment in the repair replacement in the lower scenario. So we'll want to make sure that we've got sufficient annual funding there.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. We don't have long to pull together what we're taking to council, but I think this definitely gives us good information to work with, and I think we'd be able to come up with something that hopefully will be workable. Yeah, and I would love to run my report by you.
This commission said, so
if we had time. So Anyway, if you're interested in reading that report before I go to council and providing additional feedback, I'd love to.
sure,
Reach out
yeah.
to me and let me know.
Just a question for this group, because the climate action plan went before council and I attended. I don't know if there's an expectation when this goes to the December 3rd city council workshop. Are we supposed to be there? Do we recommend that we should be there?
You don't need to be there. There's a section of the report that tells the council what the feedback was from this body. If you are interested in being there and providing feedback, you're certainly welcome to, but there's no requirement that you attend.
Okay.
Any final questions, comments from anyone? Thank you all very
Just
much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you all very much for
Thank you.
the hard work that you put into this. Thank you for keeping the wheels running. It's tough stuff.
I didn't know what to expect tonight, so I just want to thank you for really being engaged in providing this level of feedback. I don't always get that when I'm bringing things forward, so I just really appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. If nothing further, then meeting is adjourned. Bang the hour.
Well done. Well, when they get the